Are live.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. This is the meeting of the Legislative Joint Fiscal Committee. Welcome, everybody. All of the members are here with the exception of Rep. Briglin, who is joining us via Zoom. And we're grateful for everybody making time to join us today. The first order of business, other than my calling the meeting to order, is approval of the minutes of November 17th. They were in our packet. Interesting to read because it feels like it was from a different time. Is there a motion?
Second.
I'll second.
Senator
Westman.
I'm sorry.
Sears.
And Senator Sears moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those are approved. Thank you. And then the next item is to receive the July 22 economic forecast, and we're joined by our wonderful economist, Tom Covet. And let's turn it over to you, Tom. We have, Mr. Covet, we have about 30 minutes for both a presentation, but also questions that members may have. So I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much and good to be here. I will try to keep comments brief because both the e-board meeting, which just ended, so all this is adopted data, the e-board meeting and some of the briefings that were done prior to the e-board meeting went much longer than, the discussions were much longer than normal. So one was an hour and a half, one was an hour, one was, even the e-board conversation was considerably longer. So I think there are complexities with this forecast that if there are questions and things that we don't cover, I'm happy to, entertain those afterwards too. So I'll just do a brief overview and then we'll do some Q&A and see where it goes. As I preface the e-board presentation with, this is the really the worst really good forecast that we've ever presented. That is the case because in the largest fund that we're projecting data for, the general fund, it's forecast to decline in each of the next 2 fiscal years. So that's the bad news. The good news is that relative to the January projections, if you add all 3 funds together, you're probably about 150, and this is current law basis, add all 3 funds together, you're about $150 million higher than January projections were. And as current law, that includes all the session expenditures that were approved. And those are not trivial. Adding all the ups and downs and everything is a little bit north of $40 million. And fiscal 24 is about 40 million and change more than was forecast in January. So the difficult economic externals, you're all probably aware of, all the media talk about recession, slowing and interest rate increases and all the rest. And that will slow the economy appreciably and that will affect revenues. But there are 2 countervailing forces acting on the economy right now, and those will all flow through to revenues. One of those is, the enormous torrent of federal money in order to counter the effects of the pandemic and bring the economy back to full employment, which it's really pretty much done, and then some. So that enormous amount of stimulus, about 10 billion of which landed in Vermont, it's created tremendous demand, a lot of job growth, a lot of wage growth, a lot of income. wealth, asset price soared in lots of areas, some to kind of bubble-like proportions, but all that money is circulating, and a lot of it's still on the sideline, a lot of it's saved, a lot of it's unspent. So you're aware of monies that have been allocated that have yet to actually hit the ground, and there's a lot of it. That torrent of money was more than could be produced. It created demand that was beyond what supply could meet. And the result of that is inflation. And, that's not a huge surprise, but complicating that is a big part of the inflation has to do with unique supply chain issues that are connected to the pandemic. So when China shuts down with a zero COVID policy and whole regions that are gigantic production hubs for all sorts of stuff completely stop, that affects supply, creates an imbalance, and then you also get inflation. Interest rate hikes do nothing to improve Chinese supply, but they will at some point eventually bring demand down. And the problem is they bring demand down in a very uneven way. It's a very blunt tool. So it hits credit-sensitive sectors of the economy much more heavily. It reduces leverage. It creates, lots of distortions. But it's pretty much the tool that's being used, along with quantitative tightening, to try to reduce demand in the U.S. economy. There are other ways the government could do that if it wanted to. The fastest, easiest way to be to raise taxes. So you would pull money out of the economy by raising taxes, but politically that's not possible. So if you don't do anything, inflation essentially works to equal supply and demand. The price part goes way up, and the winners are anybody with money, and the losers are anybody without. So anybody who can keep paying. But essentially, these two forces are working in opposing ways. It's been described variously as one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. Cross currents, where one's, trying to slow things down, one's trying to speed it up. But in the middle of a cross current, we often get a whirlpool. And that's where we're sort of sitting. So you can spin around the whirlpool and say, geez, look how terrible this is. And inflation's really high. And we've had 2 quarters of negative GDP growth with this morning's release. And then on the other hand, you can look and say, when is the last time that anybody who wanted a job could get a job? That's a rare occurrence in the economy. And income growth, wealth statistics are at extremely high levels, record levels across all wealth percentile groups. I'll talk about some data on that, but that's essentially, there's a big store of wealth capacity that exists to absorb inflation price increases and also interest rate increases also. So, what's going to actually win and when is the ship going to turn? That's essentially what we're trying to parse with this, but there's a lot of risk attendant with that. So we're looking at a slowing economy, but not a recession is the baseline. With that said, because recession risks are high, recent Wall Street Journal poll put it at 49%, so kind of on the knife edge. But if there's a more full-blown recession and Fed interest rate hikes are responsible for most recessions, so that's not a wild conjecture. We'd be bringing numbers down even more, although probably more a fiscal 24 thing than fiscal 23, but who knows? I mean, the rate increases have been fast and furious, and there's no question that dropping, slowing demand, even if there is a recession, is the intent of the Fed. There's a quote from the Fed chair that's on one of the pages, like maybe, and page 6 says there's a risk. Is there a risk that we would go too far? Certainly there's a risk. The bigger mistake to make, let's put it that way, would be to fail to restore price stability. So It's unambiguous. That's the direction the Fed's going. So that interplay is what we're watching closely, and that's why you've got a whole lot of different things happening with subcategories of revenues. And the ones that are most likely to swing are some of the big income tax sources, corporate and personal, which were so huge in fiscal 22, just off the charts huge. And we're still, pouring through detailed tax runs that we've gotten to try to better understand that. But a lot of income growth all over the economy. So anyway, that's sort of what's at play. Just to get an idea of some of the wealth changes in terms of capacity, we look at balance sheets, both corporate and household balance sheets. Corporations right now probably have something in the neighborhood of $4 trillion in cash or cash equivalents that are capacity to, if there's a downturn, are they going to lay off people right away? Probably not, given how hard it is to find employees and the fact that they've got a lot of cash. So if sales slow a little bit, maybe you don't get as quick a response. But if demand doesn't slow, then the brake gets pushed harder and harder and harder. So interest rates could go up a lot more than we think. But if you just look at households, on page 7, there's a table that shows total household net worth. So net worth is all of your assets minus all of your liabilities, cars, houses, everything you have. And the Federal Reserve reports this out in 4 wealth percentile groups. And those groups say a lot about inequality in the country because they consist of the top 1%, the next 9%, the next 40%, so 51 to 90%, and then the bottom 50%. So, if you looked at total net worth, and I'm looking at the change from the first quarter of 2020, so pre-pandemic, to where we are with the latest data, which is the first quarter of this year, pretty close to where we are now. There was $37 trillion in growth in net worth. That is just a staggering sum of money. Not all of that is liquid, so it's not easily turned into expenditures. But if you look at the average net worth by wealth percentile group, which is those the top rows in that table, the bottom 50% had about $30,000 in net worth pre-pandemic. That's doubled to more than $60,000 per household. So that's generally not a lot of stocks and bonds and things like that. It's more like cars, a little bit maybe of real estate equity, but it's more consumer durables that represent that wealth. The next 40 went from 612 to 769 average household wealth, up 156,000. The next 9 went from 3.5 million to 4.5 million. So $1 million increase in net worth. There you get into a lot more real estate and equity holdings, various things like that. The top 1% went from an average household net worth of 24 million and change to about 35 million. So net worth went up by 10.5 million. That is a lot of capacity across the board. Interestingly, the biggest percent increase was in the bottom 50. Of course, if you went down to the bottom 20 or the bottom 10, you would have strikingly small numbers. But it's interesting, the pandemic money did go out in some cases in ways that actually really helped lower income people. Over time, you can look at that on page 9. That's the share of total net worth by the bottom 50%. It's the black line and the left scale. Starting in 1989, it's around 3.5%. It got as high as 4.3% in 1992. And look what happened during the recession, the Great Recession. It drops all the way to less than 0.5% of all the net worth of the country. That represents about $3,000 in total net worth household net worth. It's inched back up, but then you see that with the pandemic, it went up quite a bit. The top 1%, that's the right scale and the red line, that started back in '89 at around 23%. It's now more like 32%, but it can drop precipitously when equity markets fall and things like that, but it's generally more diversified wealth. And that also went up more than those two middle classes during the pandemic. But that's essentially, what we're considering as we talk about the economy slowing and it happening through interest rate increases. There's a lot of capacity to resist that, and that's why there's a lot of uncertainty. So there are interesting things happening. Unusual movement in the T fund, again, have to do with energy prices. We have T fund growth in fiscal 23 in the gas tax of 8.8%. That doesn't happen very often in a year without a tax rate change or something like that occurring. It's because the motor fuel assessment tax has a price floor, price ceiling trigger that was activated with these super high gas prices that we just recently experienced. And then it's lagged for the application of the tax revenue, such the first 2 quarters of fiscal 23 are likely to be really strong because of that. That alone, that component may grow almost 13% in fiscal 23. But then with gas prices dropping, futures prices in August are quite a bit lower than some of the current reductions. Going out further, will be still lower. It'll whipsaw back and gas revenues will decline about 3% in fiscal 24. So, there are all these unusual movements affecting individual categories. The TIB gas, which is a pure price thing, was up more than 40%. Again, just because the price was. But taxes that are not ad valorem taxes that are based on physical volumes or things like fees, those are going to be dead in the water because, the volume's not going to be increasing a lot and there's no inflation, adjustment that occurs. So the things that they're supporting, the costs are going up and the revenue is going to be flat on those. So there are going to be a lot of challenges. At the end of the e-board meeting, there was a presentation by Building Services about an expenditure that had gone up in cost 25%. They needed, at least 15% of that to cover that. But this is going to be happening all across areas of, state government expenditure. Things all of a sudden are going to be a lot more expensive. So I don't know what in the way of budgetary contingencies, get baked in for that kind of thing. There will be a lot of labor expenses and contractual services that might, for various reasons be spiking from time to time. That'll be a real challenge. Anyway, that's the revenue picture. I don't want to a little time for Q&A, but there's a lot of discussion that could occur.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
and particularly for leaving time for questions and conversation. So, members, Representative Fagan.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for bringing this in. Table 1A at the back of your packet. I just want to make sure that this is accurate because you're saying that we're looking at a revenue increase for 23 of, I think you said 150 million and 24 of 40 million?
Relative to the January forecast.
Okay.
That's the good news part of it. The bad news part of it, table 1A, that's source general fund, has 2 declines. So minus 1.8, minus 2.4. So that's why I say that's a bad forecast. Usually when we come in and we say you're going to have 2 years of nominal dollar declines, that's bad news. Fact is, fiscal 22 was so extraordinary that you're ending up with more money than we had projected would be available for each of those 2 years back in January. So that's why it's sort of good news, bad news.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Sears?
Tom, and I don't mean this disrespectful, we've both been around a long time. I don't remember a time, and would you agree that this is the most difficult time to project revenue and tax and all that? I mean, I go to the grocery store, my bill's up. I don't know whether it's 12% or 13%. It seems like I'm spending about $100 more a month. I'm a senior citizen on fixed income. A lot of Vermonters are in that boat. We have a high percentage of people on that. How do we, move forward in this difficult times?
Yeah.
I appreciate all your effort, and I really do applaud you on it, but how much confidence should we take in all
Yeah. Well, the exercise of forecasting something is not perfection of foresight. It's an understanding of risk so that the users of the forecast can balance risk. There are forecasters at Walmart and Target that were forecasting inventory and what would be demanded, right? So pre-pandemic, they had no idea that all of a sudden everybody's going to want a whole bunch of goods. They couldn't possibly get them. They went to great lengths to secure independent supply lines that would circumvent some of the shipping challenges that other retailers were dealing with. They got tremendous amount of goods in because there was all this demand. All of a sudden, people are switching now to services. Demand's really low for that. Their inventories are through the roof, right? So, it's not like anybody could have forecast a pandemic. Anybody could have forecast exactly how consumers are going to respond. But you lay out a path. You say, here's the risks, and then it's incumbent upon the people that use the forecast to try to mitigate and plan for what those risks are. One of the things that most entities that are the size of state government do is they don't forecast twice a year, they forecast 4 times a year. And they usually forecast multiple different scenarios so that you say, if this happens, here's what it's going to mean. And then you have to respond more quickly. So as you get new information, you respond to that. And this was brought up at the e-board that there'll be a close look at maybe doing a quarterly update in the fall if conditions warrant. So if things get a lot worse, when times are uncertain, it's better to increase the frequency of the forecast so you have a reaction time that's better. So it is, though, in all the years I've been doing this, and as you know, it's quite a few, it has never been this challenging. The data itself are so convoluted because the pandemic has changed relationships between things, and it has also been, just from an intellectual point of view, a really fascinating time to be doing it because it's a gigantic experiment that shows some of the characteristics of the economy in ways that you wouldn't see otherwise. So it's a lot more work, but it is also interesting. We're trying to provide the best guidance we can, but obviously when uncertainty is heightened, it pays to check in more.
I've been struck by one thing. Pre-pandemic, the legislature was fighting for $15 an hour wage.
Right.
That's what we're fighting for. Right now, you can't hire anybody at 15.
Yep.
Most jobs are now $20 an hour.
Yep.
So, that's a huge shift. Somebody's paying for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot more money around, in case anybody hadn't
So,
noticed.
I mean, that's just, I was looking at an ad the other day. I was driving by a place.
Yeah.
$20 an hour to start, or 21.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, my God, 3 years ago, we were arguing about how long it would take to get to 15.
Yeah. No, we're over that. And and essentially the way the free market allocates resources is based on who can pay, who has the money to do so. So if, wages are going up and different businesses are competing for those workers, if they can pass prices along and pay the workers more, the free market is saying that's where those resources should be. And if you can't pass along prices, you can't afford to pay your workers more, you won't get them. and what you're making won't get made. And that's happening at just this gigantic swirling scale all the way around. So the pandemic is one set of effects that's really unique. But then the offset, the federal government offset is just completely without precedent. So, $10 trillion, nationally, and 10 billion just into Vermont is a massive amount of money. And you just see it popping up in all kinds of places.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Other questions? Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add to this sort of dive into cryptocurrency that you put in here?
Oh, you just opened a door.
Well, it's come up at every other meeting, so we can do it. Yes, I would add that the intensive use of semiconductors by cryptocurrency miners has also had a very real cost in that things that really add value to the economy, like motor vehicles, have been stunted in their production, in part because of the enormous demand for semiconductors from this sector of the market, doing something that produces essentially no economic value. So add to the energy consumption that it represents, the tax avoidance in terms of payment of gain. That's how we entered. Crypto went up from to $3 trillion in tax year 2021. So the thought is, what are these asset classes that are going to be representing gains that are taxable that we'll see in personal income? So I was interacting with tax about, is there any way we could tell whether there was a gain that was crypto versus something else? The IRS has issued a lot of guidance on that, and they're going to have forms that are specific to it. But right now, it would just be a property gain. They're also trying to get some of the crypto platforms that are in the U.S. to require reporting, just like Vanguard and Fidelity have to do for people that are trading stocks and the like. So if that were to happen, it seems like very little. The IRS estimates maybe $1 trillion in total tax gap, taxes owed, unpaid taxes that are liabilities. And about 1/10 of that they think is crypto related. So if you took that down to Vermont, it would be north of $50 million in potentially lost tax revenue. But it's just by design, it's very different. Difficult to track, find out, all the rest. So that's kind of outside of the system right now. It's really, it would be benign were it not, and then also Colorado and Utah, the legislatures passed measures allowing tax payments in cryptocurrency, which to me is just, there's Dumb and Dumber, but that's really out there. It fluctuates so much. So the state's accepting the risk of the payment. Why not allow people to bring their cows and pigs in as payment? It could be any commodity or a poker chip that then you have to, but it is a recreational, almost a casino type recreational activity with really high potential costs. And it's supercharged by the great technology that we have these days, so that it can explode globally in interest and invest, and money pouring in and all the rest. And it's totally unregulated. So all the scammers in the world can just poach this stuff. The National Bureau of Economic Research has done a series of studies on crypto, and one of them tried to identify who the real winners were. For the most part, it's the people that create the currencies and some of the very first buyers, which you don't always know. But it's not a surprise. They make the rules of the game. It's a game, Well, the whole mining process is a game. It uses huge amounts of electricity now. I think this will be viewed at some point in time as one of the most foolish human endeavors that, along with the tulip bulbs and all the other things, in past human manias that occurred, but technology supercharges that in a way. So it has tax implications, it has economic implications. That's why it comes in to my purview. But I actually, full disclosure, I bought a Bitcoin in 2015 because I wanted to know what, as an economist, I wanted to know what it was and how it works and all the rest. And I still have it, but it's, high frictional cost if you want to spend it, if you want to turn it into dollars, a lot of scamming going on, easy to lose. But anyway, that's
Thank you.
2 cents on it.
It's your Bitcoin.
Or a bit, or
Well, that's my Bitcoin. That's right, a little bit, yeah.
terrific. Thank you very much
Yeah, sure.
for joining us, Mr. Kvet. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
All righty. Next up, we have the administration fiscal updates, and Commissioner Gresham and Mr. Merrill, if you'll join us down here and maybe drag a chair to over there. Or if you would like to stand, you're welcome, but drag a chair, please. So. You missed.
We're not going to be budgeting in Bitcoin anymore.
Yeah, right.
I heard it here first.
Yeah.
So thanks for, I guess, nice to see you folks. We were to come to speak to you about FY22 closeout, and I'm here to say that is why we're here. So I figured we would tag team it. I would yield to the Deputy Commissioner on the General Fund, and I would pick up with the T Fund and the Ed Fund.
Thank you, Adam. Well, I've got an easier job today than Tom Kvet because I'm simply speaking to real actual numbers that are realized as of the fiscal year 22 closeout. We've got a general fund operating statement that was distributed, I believe, as one of the supporting materials. And I thought with our limited time, it would be most effective for me to just take you to the bottom line on this document.
This document.
It looks like this.
Maybe
Exactly.
can you direct us?
Yep.
And
So if you look down the text headings on the left-hand side of the page, I'm going to bring you to the unallocated operating surplus line. And
Which piece of paper?
it looks like this, and it's called a general fund operating statement. So this is the actual financial results. The left column is fiscal 21, just for reference, and it has some numbers that correspond to 22, for instance, carry forward. But I want to jump right to the chase, which is in the FY22 column on the right, the unallocated operating surplus line, which is about 8/10 of the way down the page. And I'm circling the number that says 177.44. So what that means is $177.44 million is left on the bottom line, unallocated, for use in the current fiscal year. Now, I'm going to add an important note to that, and it's noted in the margin to the right, which is that of that 177 million, 86 million of it has already been spoken for, and that was done in Act 83, the BAA, in Section 53, where the first line of that section was to state that the first $86 million of unallocated surplus on the bottom line would be carried forward to FY23 for appropriation. That was language in the BAA. That language was not changed, although other aspects of that section were in the Big Bill. And as part of the Big Bill Act 185 for FY23, $86 million of general fund was used by the legislature in appropriations in Act 185. What that means, though, is that 86 taken away from 177 means that $91.4 million remains unallocated on the bottom line and available for use in FY23. So I guess the headline would be that in addition to the significant anticipated surplus revenues, which have yet to be realized but are forecast by the consensus economic forecast, there is already on the bottom line in the bank $91.4 million available for use. And the word, unprecedented seems to be overused these days, but again, it's appropriate. Seeing a number like this $177 million unallocated surplus on the bottom line is unprecedented and remarkable. The only time we've seen a number like that was in FY21, the column to the left, where there was that 103 unallocated number left on the bottom line. Out of that, 100 of that was used in August doing the ARPA conversions based on a contingent appropriation in the previous year's big bill, leaving only 3.6 truly unallocated for use. But here, even after making over $150 million of contingent appropriations between the transfers and appropriations in section 53 of the BAA as amended by C-102 of the big bill, even after that, there's the 90 million left. And so based on our limited time, I'm not sure if I should go into more detail up above on the uses, which is again, remarkable to look at when you look at the fact that we started at $1.72 billion of base appropriations and then subsequently added to that, you can see over $500 million of appropriations really based on additional revenue and add to that another $100 million of transfers in the next section of allocations, and still on the bottom line, there's $90 million left. And again, that's real money in the bank, regardless of what happens in terms of economic events in the near term. So I guess I'll pause there for any questions from the committee.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any, so perhaps we should move on to the T fund.
I'll do the T fund and the ed fund. And I got to say, after those kinds of numbers, I don't feel like I'm worthy here. But I mean, in the context, the type of numbers I'm speaking about would be much more typical of the general fund in prior years, 5 million, 10 million here and there. So it's really, the T fund is pretty straightforward. You'll recall that in the FY22 T fund, they post BAA in 22, there was $20 million that was budgeted to be left on the bottom line, and that was to meet what are anticipated to be substantial state match requirements. Two things happened to change that number from 20 to 15. The first is that the January forecast upon which the budget was based was $296 million. And the actual amount that came in at the end of the year was 287 million change. So roughly $8 million lag in terms of revenues. And then the second thing was that there originally was thought to be $15 million of federal reimbursements, federal indirects. That was actually 18 million. So the 8 million reduction in revenue was partially balanced by 3 million increase in federal. So the net of it was a $5 million reduction to the bottom line, which was going to be 20 million as budgeted. It ended the year at 15 million sitting on the bottom line. So still decent money to use for state match. Our hope and expectation is that quite a bit more state match will be needed. And then I know that you've heard a bit on the education fund. That, again, I think is a good story. You'll recall that in the Yield Bill Act 178, there were two contingencies there. to the extent that revenue permitted them. The first one was the first 10 million of contingent money would be dropped to the bottom line and remain there for the following year. And the second 10 million of contingent money was going to add to the $22 million PCB reserve. So that too was hit with revenues that came in. So the PCB reserve now sits at $32 million. And the $10 million was brought to the bottom line. And in fact, at the end of the day, or at the end of the year in FY22, there was another roughly $3.5 million unallocated in reserve. So the Ed Fund ended 22 in good shape. It'll carry into 23 in good shape. And it looks like the revenue forecast will favor it. So I think both for the T Fund and the Ed Fund, we're feeling reasonably comfortable and see what happens.
Terrific, thank you. Questions on that? Not seeing any. Fund balances, reversions, reserves. Do we have a document on that one? I'm not.
So that document is in your.
In their new packet.
And then the
there.
new? Okay.
Would you like to speak to that? I mean, I don't know if there's a lot to say about that.
Is it,
I can,
I help find it.
while you're looking for the document,
I
I
don't seem to have it.
What is new package?
It's,
So,
it's what it be to
oh, that's a letter. Looks like.
So this report, which is typically required by session law in the big bills, as it is again this year, merely requires us to report on the actual final transfers, since these amounts are uncertain until last week, really, when we're in our final days of final closeout of the fiscal year. And I guess what I can comment is that unclaimed property, the actual transfer of about 6.5 million is a little more than twice what was originally in Act 74 as the projection, which was 3 million. The Secretary of State Services Fund transfer came in very close, about $100,000 higher than the number projected in Act 74. The AGO's office came in with less than originally expected. There was a $2 million number in Act 74, and at the end of the fiscal year, $357,000 was the actual transfer amount.
Okay, thank you. Pretty straightforward. So I think we can, I'm not seeing questions, so I think, thank you all very much. So let us move on to the general discussion of global commitment in Medicaid. We've had a half an hour allocated for probably a 3-hour conversation. First up, Mr. Donahue, if you'll join us. And that would be terrific. And let's see, to orient people, this will now be C1 in your packet. Yeah. In the original packet. Oh, it looks like that. Okay. All right, I'm looking at the wrong thing, but go ahead, Mr. Donahue, and I'll figure out where I am.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see everyone in person. I just want to ensure that everybody has the presentation that we provided ahead of time. Looks like you all, yes. Yes.
Got there. Thank you.
So providing an overview of the agency's closeout position for state fiscal year 22, I'm going to focus on general fund and the general fund portion of global commitment. I know that my colleague Nolan Langwell from the JFO will be speaking specifically about Medicaid, annual Medicaid report, and Medicaid closeout. So if we can jump in, I think we can go past the first slide, the title slide, and go to page 2, which is a 60,000-foot flyover of the closeout position for the agency for fiscal year 22, and is a table that you probably are all pretty familiar with reviewing. And the theme that we've heard so far this afternoon of unprecedented continues here with AHS. If I can draw your attention, the far left column of figures, that's total all fund expenditures in aggregate as of the end of fiscal year 22 of $4.9 billion. That's a duplicated fund count, as you probably are all already aware. That includes the match and federal funds for global commitment and IDTs. Moving to the next column to the right is the resulting general fund balance of $233.5 million. Of that, $155 million in the next column to the right is comprised of general fund one-times and other obligations. And I have footnoted the major components of that $155 million for you at the bottom of this slide. The two major pieces of that figure are $76.3 million in one-time general fund appropriations that the agency just could not feasibly deploy or operationalize by the end of fiscal year 22, and $65 million in carry forward match for the CMS-approved HCBS spending plan that I know you all are, that all of you are already familiar with. So moving one more column to the right, that results in a general fund net carry forward request of $76.7 million. Now, I want to say that, as you probably heard before, this is a preliminary figure. Our carry forward request was submitted to Commissioner Gresham and is of course subject to his review and discretion and approval. Some highlights of that $76.7 million in terms of needs that we anticipate this state fiscal year include the further wind down of the global commitment investment IMDs, which will result in the loss of FMAP for those costs, as well as the agency's Pay Act contribution, what we can contribute in addition to the Pay Act appropriations that are available that we would request at the end of this state fiscal year of the agency of administration, and what we forecast as ongoing provider stabilization needs in fiscal year 23 as we continue to proceed through this phase of the pandemic and head into the fall and winter. Then the far right column is what we have proposed to Commissioner Gresham, subject to his discretion, of up to $1.7 million that could be reverted. That is the result of two one-time appropriations in the central office of matching funds that are no longer needed because either the costs were covered 100% by FEMA, and approximately $400,000 of that balance is associated with a reversion of matching funds for primary care scholarships that was enacted as part of the big bill for this year. So the $77 million carry forward request represents about 7.3% of the general fund balance at the end of fiscal year 22 for the agency after accounting for one-time appropriations and obligations. Then I think we can go to the next slide, which is also a graph that I believe you all are familiar with, which just shows a timeline and expenditure trajectory for the agency. This is a non-duplicated fund count, so it does not include duplicated funds for global commitment or IDT. And you'll see that for fiscal years 20 and 22, there's a market increase in spending that can be almost entirely attributable to the unprecedented influx of federal funds, both COVID-specific federal funds and FEMA funding. And even when correcting for FEMA funding, which is the dotted segment line between 20 and 22, we still have quite an increase of remaining COVID federal funds that has flowed into AHS over the last 2 fiscal years. So that's the high level flyover. And then I thought in the last slide of the presentation here, I could just go one level down in detail and summarize some of the major components of our closeout position. So AHS continued to leverage coronavirus relief funds, 100% FEMA federal participation, as well as other COVID federal funding, comprised of substantially dedicated payroll at the Department of Corrections, where we were able to exchange general fund for CRF. VDH for a second year experienced an influx of COVID-specific epidemiology and laboratory capacity funding and 100% FEMA funds at a 100% federal participation rate. DCF, as you are all probably already aware, funded emergency housing and the expansion of emergency housing with FEMA funds in 22. And then the central office as well leveraged FEMA funding for testing and vaccine administration. So just touching on FEMA a little bit for the committee's benefit, just to remind us all here that FEMA is a reimbursement-based program. So we incur the costs, we file claims with FEMA, FEMA reviews the claims. If they approve the expenditures, then we're reimbursed on the back end. And in 22, we enjoyed a 100% federal participation rate. Effective July 2nd, and for the duration of FEMA eligibility during the public health emergency this fiscal year, there's going to be a 10% state fund match requirement. And I'm sure you are all already familiar with that. Of FEMA funds, AHS, as of the close of 22, has anticipated FEMA receipts balance of $120 million. And to date, AHS has received $92.2 million in actual award payments. In terms of the major departments that had underspending contributing to AHS's closeout position, there was Dale Choices for Care. As you're aware, there's the 1% reserve requirement for Choices for Care and also typically reinvestment proposals. And then DCF's Child Development, Family Services, and OEO divisions had significant underspending. And those were the major contributors across the departments in AHS for our final position. An update on the Vermont Offender Work Program. Yes.
Yeah.
I just wanted, you didn't mention, I'm looking on the back too, but it's down here and it's something that I'm sure Senator Sears will know. And that's the 2.7 million.
Yes.
EOC. You haven't talked about, but referencing that money that's available for reinvestment. And
yes.
I don't see it on the back either, but to me, that's just as important as the Choices for Care. It's modeled on the same. I just wanted to say, I assume that that's there.
Correct, it is. Yes, that is a very fair point, that is as important as the Choices for Care related carry forward requirements. It is being carried forward for those purposes. And as you are all aware, there's a new specific division appropriation at DOC for justice reinvestment. And these funds would flow into that appropriation through the BAA so that they would be sitting there going forward. Does that answer your question?
No, it's just
okay.
It's in one place, but not on the back. And I just wanted to make sure of that.
Thank you for asking that.
I was going to ask.
Well, and so was I.
Okay.
And so I'm curious, it's just, are you telling us that it wasn't able to be deployed in 22 and you're just carrying it forward into 23?
That's the remaining balance of funds that are specific to justice reinvestment initiatives that need to be carried forward that could not otherwise be deployed during fiscal year 22.
And so I would be interested, and I think others would be interested in learning why those weren't able to be used in the current, the former, in 22.
Yes.
So just if somebody could, so an email maybe to JFO and we'll get it out to members about what's going on with that program.
And may I also request a breakdown of the DCF carried forward? Why we didn't, is it all housing? And I heard you say other items.
I can give you a little bit more information on that.
I mean, it's so much higher than the rest of the agency.
Yep. Understood.
It stands out, so.
Agreed. So for the Child Development Division, it underspent by approximately $7 million. That was largely attributed to reduced caseloads and utilization during the pandemic relative to what had been projected as caseload and utilization needs for 22. In Family Services, there was a $5 million underspent of general fund, largely attributed to administrative vacancy savings because of the challenges that division continues to experience in filling its vacant positions, as well as reduced demand for substitute care services. And then for DCFOEO, the big player there was FEMA. There were FEMA funds that were eligible for a lot of the base expenditures in OEO's programs, which freed up general fund to fall to the bottom line, and that is part of the carry forward plan that we've submitted to Commissioner Gresham. And there were also some delayed projects with OEO that allowed for funding to fall to the bottom line.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rep. Fagan.
Thank you. Different topic. I just want to ask a little bit about choices for care. I'm a board member of RAVNA, and over the course of the last 15 or so years, RAVNA has never been, of course, it's now under a new name, but if I say RAVNA, everyone knows it's the Rockland Area Visiting Nurse Association and Hospice organization, and it includes down to Bennington County. But they have never been reimbursed for their expenditures under Choices for Care and have always incurred a loss. That loss has been sustained because of Medicare payment rates. As you're probably aware, Medicare has proposed a reduction in payment rates of in excess of 6% going forward. I think it's 6.9 or 6.3, cannot remember the exact number, but that will really impact the ability of certainly RAVNA to be able to absorb and offset the losses that they incur in Choices for Care every year. And I would just like, and of course, there's no guarantee that 6 point whatever is going to go into effect yet, but it's certainly on the board's mind because they just are trying to make sure that we come out even every year, or maybe just a little bit better than that. What are your thoughts, please?
I can follow up with you offline if that's acceptable regarding specifics on the situation that you have brought to my attention. I am not prepared to speak to that in detail here.
That's fine.
Okay, so I'd be happy to do that and also follow up with the committee generally on the DOC questions around justice reinvestment funds and underspending from 22. Are there any other questions before I wrap up the last slide? Okay, very good. So just highlights then for the general fund carry forward specific to the global commitment appropriations at the agency. Again, noting for the committee 6.2% enhanced FMAP available due to the public health emergency for the entirety of fiscal year 22. There was $65 million of carry forward for the HCBS spending plan, as I previously mentioned. $7.5 million toward caseload and utilization for consensus this state fiscal year. $1.6 million for Choices for Care reinvestments and 1% reserves. And again, these are the match side of the equation. $1.9 million in matching funds for nursing home EFRs that were approved during fiscal year 22, but were not able to be paid until this year. Those payments are imminent. And $3.5 million at the moment of an estimated loss of FMAP, again, due to the continued winding down of global commitment investments for IMDs. And that concludes what I was prepared to speak to today. And I just want to see if there were any other questions that the committee might have.
I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Nunny, really appreciate it. And now Mr. Langweil, Medicaid year end is in our original package. I have it, so it's C1 and it actually says emergency board, but it's the same doc.
C2.
C2, well, mine says C1.
It's because I gave your packet to you.
Early.
You're the only one that got it early.
C2,
C2.
except for Mary.
She's C1.
Big battleship, C2, hit. Record.
Nolan Langwell, Joint Fiscal Office. I'm going to keep it really brief, partially because this committee, many people here have heard the presentation already. And two, I want to make sure there's time for you to hear from Ashley Berliner on some of the updates. Statute requires that there be a year-end Medicaid report that describes Medicaid-related expenses. So those purposes, I'm going to just kind of talk about some of the highlights of this. As you know, this is the third fiscal year that we've been dealing with the public health emergency related to COVID-19. Overall, Medicaid and Medicaid-related expenditures came in just shy of $2 billion. This is 2% or $40 million below what was projected, but still represents a 10% increase over fiscal year 21. Rich talked a little about choices for care. I'll skip over that. He talked about the waiver investments coming in slowly below expectations. Most of this was driven by the phase down and cap on the investments of institutes for medical. I don't like this term, so I'm just going to say IMD. This phase down will continue to be a fiscal pressure as we have to shift some of the costs to state dollars. Caseloads came in very close to what was adopted by the E-Board last year. There's two areas that are worth noting. One was the suspended determination impacts. I think folks have been hearing about this for years. There's 3 non-disabled adult categories which usually see churn on and off the program, but people are not churning. There's no churning because people are not being disenrolled because of the maintenance of effort requirement that's tied to the fiscal relief, federal fiscal relief bill that gives us the 6.2% FMAP bump. So that's tied to the public health emergency. So to the extent that there continues to be a public health emergency as declared by the Health and Human Services Secretary, and we continue to get the 6.2% per quarter, we'll also not be able to disenroll folks. So enrollment will continue to increase. So that's the one piece. The other piece that was of interest was the Vermont Premium Assistance Program. We had anticipated a 5% increase in this group. However, there was actually a decrease of 20% in this group. However, that's the Vermont Premium Assistance piece. There's also the CSR, the cost sharing reduction subsidies, which most everybody who has the CSR are also has the VPA, but that stayed flat. So I don't know why one group went down and one group went flat. So we don't have any information on that at this time, but we'll look into that. Finally, we continue to get the temporary 6.2% FMAP bump, as I talked about. This resulted in $88 million in general fund savings in fiscal year 22. I think in my report, I have how much we received each year of the pandemic. At this time, we do know that we will continue to get this at least through the December quarter, fiscal year 23, which we estimate will be roughly $45 million in budget savings. That'll be part of the budget adjustment conversation. I think at that, I will end there and see if there's questions.
Thank you. I am not seeing any.
Great.
So terrific. Thank you, Mr. Langwell. Appreciate it. And I appreciate you leaving time so that we can have the presentation on the global commitment waiver. So Ashley Berliner and Tracy O'Connell are scheduled to join us. I'm sorry, I don't know them. They're not here. Okay, so I was worried that I was not recognizing somebody.
No, and on your agenda, there's a
from online.
Oh, they were.
So on your
Okay.
agenda, I put little green footnotes at the end of each name.
And what does that
That'll either say
mean?
video conference or
Video
in person.
conference. And are they joining
They're
us?
in the Zooms, but they will be.
Let me see. Oh, there's Tracy. Okay.
That's what VC meant.
Yeah, I didn't have time.
Venture
to tell you.
capital, virtual.
Vietcong.
Yeah. We just dated ourselves, yeah. Okay, so
I'm asking for them to send their videos and stuff.
I see. There we go. Okay, and I know this is a topic of deep interest to a lot of people. And we have a very limited amount of time. So our thought is that will receive this presentation. I know that there are others who may want to have a longer, more detailed conversation about the waiver, and we'd be happy to facilitate. JFO can set up meetings with committee chairs and other members who would like to dive deeper. But so right now we're just going to do high level, maybe from committee members. We'll take some questions if there are any, and we'll have a general understanding and people will know how they want to dive in later. So with that, we'll turn it over to you, Ms. Berliner and Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Ashley Berliner. I'm the Director of Medicaid Policy.
Oh, really? We're working on the quality of your sound, so that was pretty rough there. Wait, will you start again, please?
I'm trying to connect to a different device. I apologize. Tracy, why don't you introduce yourself?
You're pretty echoey. I don't know what to suggest.
Maybe shut our camera off.
Oh.
Is this better?
Not great. Try shutting your camera off and see if for some reason that changes it.
Headphones are always better.
Yeah, and if you have a pair of headphones, I'm sure that's not going to work as quickly.
So much better. We're so much better at remotes now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That got better, though we may have just lost you now. You there, Ashley? Whoops.
I'm here. I'm sorry.
For cameras won't show on there.
Oh, is that it?
Right.
Oh,
We could still hear, I think.
yeah.
Let him talk a bit more. I
think it maybe is improved. So go ahead and we'll interrupt if it's not working for us.
I think it should be good. I just put my headset in, so hopefully you can hear me. Okay. For the record, Ashley Berliner, Director of Medicaid Policy for the state of Vermont. And before I get started, I just want to set the stage for what the context of the negotiation was when we started. You probably recall conversations a couple of years ago where we talked about something called rebasing of budget neutrality, and we had a lot of concerns about the capacity to continue to invest in our Medicaid program the way we've been accustomed to over the life of our global commitment waiver going into a renegotiation. We applied for this 1115 waiver extension under the Trump administration in 2020, facing really, really difficult political headwinds. And we were extremely concerned about maintaining what we had going into the negotiation. We were very fortunate to have a shift in those headwinds while we negotiated, and instead of playing defense, we ended up with a pretty incredible waiver. And so I want to share that information with the committee now, and I'm really going to be focused on two things: really unprecedented flexibility and a significant amount of funding going into our Medicaid program. And I believe you all have the presentation in front of you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
Great. So on the unprecedented flexibility piece, we have more dollars to stabilize and promote continued innovation in Vermont's healthcare system than we've ever had. Our investment budget increased by 32% over the last demonstration, allowing for increased capacity to invest in initiatives and programs that address social determinants of health and services and for populations that Medicaid does not typically fund. So that was a really big win. Again, thinking back to the beginning when we applied and worried about just being able to maintain our existing investments, the fact that we've been able to grow that capacity by 32% is a big win. The budget neutrality limit that exists on all 1115 waivers says that all waivers must be budget neutral. And the way it works, budget neutrality math is a little weird, but you essentially set the budget neutrality limit during the negotiation for the term of the demonstration. So you know what your budget neutrality is for the next 5 years before it even starts. And that is with a pretty modest trend. So in this negotiation, we were looking at a trend on top of our current expenditures of about 3.5% to 5.5%, depending on the population. And that was based on the 2019 baseline. So obviously a lot's happened between 2019 and 2022 when we got this approved. The inflation hitting our healthcare system is unprecedented, and a 3.5% to 5.5% trend was grossly inadequate for us to be able to invest and stabilize in our system of care. We had asked for a pretty significant COVID adjustment to be able to handle some of that inflation and make sure that we could sustain our provider community. And the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services came back and said that they can't give us that COVID inflationary adjustment. It really does need to be either historical trends or president's budget trend, whatever is lower. But they did say that they would allow us to amend our budget neutrality limit mid-demonstration in order to accommodate provider rate increases. This has never before been granted by CMS to any state anywhere. It is really beyond our imagination that we were able to get this, and it provides us the flexibility to the extent that we have state matching funds to invest in our provider rates without concern of hitting the budget neutrality ceiling. So I want to just stop there because I think it's a really important concept, and I know Tracy O'Connell is the real expert here if you guys have any questions, or if not, we can move on.
I am not, Rep. Fagan.
Thank you. Is the budget neutrality here, because I haven't heard a number yet, is it, what is it based off of? You talked about the 2019 trend, but it's not that. So what is it based off of, please?
It's hard to give a clear number because it's a per member per month by population. So the number, it's not like a global budget. That doesn't exist. Depending on the population, whether it's age blind disabled or new adult group or long-term care, it's different per member per month. And it is kind of different inflationary or trend factors depending on the population. So it's not a really clear number.
That's okay. It's essentially, it's a brand new formula that we've been given is what it sounds like. And so that was helpful to understand the per member per month by population. And I can certainly see how it's going to be different for every population.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Kitchell.
Yeah, just one comment. Not everybody on the committee is familiar with the term investment, and it ties into, for those of us on the budget, we know that Vermont has really benefited from the waiver, and we have over $100 million of spending that is supported by Medicaid that would not be permissible under the regular rules. So the renewal and then having a 30% increase is really very substantial, because that is something that most people don't even connect. But if we didn't have if we were pushing against the maximum there, it really was a source of concern for any of us who have worked on the budget. But it really allows us to use money, and there's a very long list, if anyone wants to know, of how we are using those dollars and making those investments. But it's a very critical piece of the waiver, that we would not have that money in the absence of a waiver.
Thank you. I think we can move on.
Great. So the last piece in terms of flexibility is related to the health information exchange and health information technology incentive payments that we've provided to the healthcare community over the last several years. That has always been limited to a set of providers that does not include specialty providers, particularly in long-term services and supports, substance use disorder treatment and mental health treatment. And we received the ability to pay up to $15 million in incentive payments to help those specialty providers better plug in to our health information exchange infrastructure to be able to support population health. So we're very excited about that as well.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Representative Kornheiser.
Do you imagine that either of those massive changes will impact commercial rates at all?
I cannot speak to that. That would have to be a conversation, I think, in the legislature with how you wanted to address any potential cost shift from commercial to Medicaid. But it's certainly what it does is that it eliminates a federal barrier to raising rates.
Good know. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so let's keep moving.
Okay. So on the new and expanded coverage, in addition to the flexibility, so how we can pay for things that aren't normally paid for and provide services to individuals who aren't normally covered, we were able to expand access to substance use disorder treatment for Vermont's above Medicaid income. This is a first in nation authority that allows us to create a healthcare benefit wrap for individuals over Medicaid income to receive substance use disorder treatment under the Medicaid program using Medicaid dollars. So if you're familiar with the community rehabilitation treatment program that's operated under our global commitment waiver for years, this would be a parallel program for substance use disorder rather than the CRT program, which focuses on mental health. We're really excited about this in particular because we know that Medicare does not provide sufficient substance use disorder treatment to its beneficiaries. And there are a lot of people that are falling through the gaps of coverage related to SUD treatment. So this assures that for individuals up to 225% of the federal poverty level, they will be able to receive comprehensive substance use disorder treatment under the waiver. It is something that we weren't positive we were going to get authority for. It is a brand new, again, first of its kind authority. And so we wanted to get the approval before we could really start digging into the details of the design and implementation planning. We're doing that now, but given kind of the breadth of this program, we don't anticipate being able to turn this on until the beginning of 2025.
So interesting. Rep. Kornheiser?
Do you envision that this would just be for folks accessing services through hub and spoke or beyond the hub and spoke? Or is 2025?
Beyond hub and spoke. So it would be a comprehensive substance use disorder treatment. We have a lot of design considerations that we need to take into account, whether or not it would be the preferred provider network that VDH operates, but it certainly wouldn't be limited to the hub and spoke model.
How many people are likely, how many additional folks are likely to come into this?
Tracy, do you have that number?
I do. And for the record, Tracy O'Connell, I'm a financial director with the Agency of Human Services. We were projecting a little over 11,000 members a year.
Can you say that again?
11,000 members a year.
Total or new?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part.
It is
new members.
11,000 altogether or 11,000 new people into the system?
New people. These are individuals that aren't eligible for Medicaid today. They either have commercial insurance or underinsured. And so these would be new people receiving this WRAP benefit.
Okay, that's an interesting number. Let's keep going.
Okay, permanent supportive housing is another brand new program that we anticipate setting up in 2025, focused on the home and community-based services population to help with receiving and then maintaining housing. So this would specifically support things like first and last month's rent, moving costs, security deposits, and then once the housing is secured, things like supportive employment, case management, and really making sure that people have the community supports needed to maintain and strive in a permanent supported housing environment. This is something that many other states have launched in the last couple of years, and we're going to be looking at those programs to really learn from them and think through how we can best administer this, again, looking at 2025 for an effective date.
Okay, keep going, please. Yeah.
Community Rehabilitation and Treatment, CRT, is a mental health wrap. It is similar to the SUD treatment I mentioned above. It's been longstanding in Vermont Medicaid, and it focuses on individuals with a serious mental illness who are above the Medicaid income threshold. Previous to this waiver, it was for individuals 138% FPL to 185% FPL. Under this waiver agreement, we have eliminated the income limit. So now, regardless of income, if you have a gap in your insurance where you are not receiving adequate mental health treatment, Medicaid will provide this benefit for you if you have a severe mental illness. It's the first time that CMS has ever approved a Medicaid-like benefit regardless of income. So we're really excited about this provision.
Again, how many folks are likely to come into this program?
Look to Tracy for that.
That number is actually a little bit more difficult to tease out because the way that we develop the budget neutrality is we collapse all of CRT together. So we'd have to follow back. We could follow up with you once we're able to tease out that number.
Okay, thank you.
The last thing on this slide is new peer support benefit for both the SUD and CRT wrap. This would be a brand new benefit both for state plan Medicaid members, so comprehensive Medicaid folks, and the individuals of higher income receiving that wrap benefit. And it would allow peer specialists to work with individuals using their lived experience and help them to develop skills to address their mental health and substance use treatment. We are really looking at peer support as a way to help with workforce issues as well as a way to really get in with particular beneficiaries that might be more responsive to working with a peer. So that's a benefit that we will be standing up.
Rep. Kornheiser?
I'm just wondering if there's a longer briefing scheduled on this at some point so I could not hold all of my
I think we may need to hold off because, as I said, we could have easily spent an hour or two on this alone. And
I'm happy to hold off now. I just sort of want to, I guess, establish with the folks on the screen that I think it would be helpful to have a longer briefing with some folks at some point soon.
I totally agree that we need more on this. I'd like to know what we're losing, what we're gaining, and everything in between here. I am worried about some of the things that we may not be, particularly in mental health. I'm a little concerned about a statement about the retreat that I read earlier, so I'd like to more fully understand.
I agree, and I know that there are definitely folks outside, beyond the Joint Fiscal Committee, who are terribly interested in this. So let us think about how to organize that, either just for JFC or a broader one. And how about pushing through, since we're already well over our time, pushing through with this just overview, which will help maybe frame some questions that we'll have, and we'll figure out how to do it.
And that makes it much easier to hold back the questions.
Yeah, knowing that
your opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
I suspect this will be a topic of a lot of committee discussion starting in January.
Okay, so I think we're prepared, ready to go to the last slide.
Great. I'll try to move a little quicker. So Lund Home, in addition to Brattleboro Retreat and Vermont Psychiatric Care Hospital, have been required to have all of their federal funding phased down by 2026. Through this negotiation, we were able to gain sustained Medicaid funding for Lund Home due to the unique nature of their maternal child health focus. They are no longer part of the IMD phase down. This is the first IMD in the country that has received an exception to the 60-day hard limit by CMS. So we're really excited that this program is not going to be losing any federal money. Similarly, on the Vermont Psychiatric Care Hospital and Brattleboro Retreat side, we were able to negotiate an additional 3 years to phase down. So now instead of the 2026 phase down requirement, we have until 2029 to completely phase out the ineligible IMD spending at those facilities. We are going to be continuing reimbursement of personal care for parents and caretakers who are providing those services to their loved ones. This is a provision that was available under the public health emergency, and we are going to be continuing that under 1115 waiver authority so that those parents and caretakers can continue to provide those services to beneficiaries. We're adding a new life skills aid benefit for individuals in the Choices for Care groups. We are making a change to the moderate needs clinical criteria, which will help providers in the field better manage the really unwieldy wait list for moderate needs right now, and will allow them to triage people who are more in need for moderate need services.
Can I just,
go ahead.
That's something I'd like to know more about too, because what this means to me is some people who are on the list now will be taken off the list who may, in their opinion, need, and then we as legislators get called about why you cut these people off the eligibility for care. I mean, it sounds great when you put it in those terms, but I am really worried about less services for people that are trying to take care of moderate needs.
Yeah, and I think Dale can definitely speak to that. Just quickly, we would
Well,
not
I mean, at a
be
later,
removing.
when we have a more thorough discussion of this,
Yeah.
I'd really like to better understand who's not going to be served.
Sure. And as part of this, we would not be removing anyone who's currently receiving services. It would just be for future individuals. On the V-Farm, this is something the Vermont legislature asked us to do, and we received authority for, which is increasing the pharmacy benefit for low-income Vermonters on V-Farm. We previously had 3 tiers in V-Farm, with only the lowest income tier receiving a comprehensive pharmacy benefit. We now have a comprehensive pharmacy benefit for the 2 higher tiers as well. So individuals on Medicare up to 225% of federal poverty level now have the full comprehensive Medicaid pharmacy benefit.
Another big deal. That's great. Yeah. Well, you've whetted our appetite for an awful lot more information. And so we will work with you to set up a briefing, both for JFC, but for other members. And we'll just have to sort to see how that would work during this interim time. With that, thank you very much. Really appreciate the whetting of our appetite.
Thank you.
Yeah. And with that, and just knowing that we are now pretty substantially over our time, not surprisingly, let's move on to the presentation on the VITA short-term forgivable loan program. Ms. Polinas and Mr. Sampson, if you want to join us, or down here. We know that this may be a work in progress. And so if you can tell us where we are and maybe how we should be moving forward.
Sure. Thank you, Cassie Polinas with VITA. Thanks for inviting me here. I did provide a fairly detailed memo along with attachments that I'm sure were overwhelming. So I'm not going to go to that level of drilling down into the details of the calculator and the application. I'll, in recognition of the timing here. I'm going to keep it high level. This is a $19 million program created by Act 183. And it uses some of the state's COVID allocation to address the ongoing economic impacts that businesses are still feeling today. So the intent of the program, I emphasize the intent of the program, is to help businesses that are continuing to feel the impact of the pandemic. Okay? And these businesses generally they've suffered a disproportionate amount of the impact. The bill does call out certain priority sectors, and we can talk about that. I know there's been some discussion about including arts and culture as a priority sector because they do have a separate $9 million program. So we can be flexible on that issue. I want to note it is recognized that most businesses have received previous COVID relief. And most businesses, or a lot of businesses, I should say, are seemingly doing well. The economy's opened back up. We hear about difficulty getting into your favorite restaurant and so on and so forth. However, what we see doesn't always paint the picture of the suffering that the businesses are dealing with right now, which has to do with still the pandemic, labor shortages, inflation, supply chain issues. So any business, and they're out there, that didn't get on solid financial footing from all the previous money that they might have had access to, continues to be shaky from a going forward basis, from having enough working capital to weather another downturn or another bad cycle. That's what this is intended to address, okay? The statute has very strict requirement and definition of how we measure economic harm. And that's the 22.5% decline in adjusted net operating income. There's some wiggle room in how we can look to calculate that 22.5%. I won't go into all the nitty-gritty of accounting rules, but suffice it to say that a business that suffered a 22.5% decline in its operating income, even after you take into account all the other money that they received, is likely not on sound financial footing, okay? So the statute looks at 2020, 2021, and measures that against 2019. But as I said earlier, the intent is continuing economic harm. So VITA intends to require 2022 financial data in our analysis. And this is something that we've been discussing with JFO. And I should have led off by saying we've been having ongoing conversations with JFO for the requirements of this program. So it makes sense to include 2022. So in some cases, that's going to mean the business might either not be eligible at all because they're doing so well, or if they're eligible, they'll get less because they're doing well enough that the math works out that they get a lesser loan amount. Or alternatively, a business that's really suffering because inflation has gone way up, or they can't be open as many days of the week. A lot of these businesses that we're talking about, these priority sectors, operate on very thin margins. So they need to be operating at or near full capacity to make that profit that they can then carry over and invest into the next year into their working capital or expansion plans. So that's the key here, is that they don't have enough. It's designed so that VITA can have some flexibility on looking at that, but at the same time, they're very strict requirements in here. As I say, that 22.5% threshold is a high threshold. We have heard from several of the sectors that we've talked to. We've already started our outreach on, hey, this is coming, what do you think? And that 22.5% is a high threshold. Most of them won't qualify just based on that. I know that there's been conversations during the past week as folks have had a chance to look at this memo. And there's some thoughts about how VITA would calculate the loan amount. The statute does have a pretty clear definition of, it won't exceed the lesser of 3 different ways of looking at it. Most businesses, even if they qualify, are going to get the differential in what they lost in their working capital. So that's going to be less than 6 months of operating expenses. We've run a lot of scenarios. So it's going to be a little bit, but it's not going to be, we're giving money away to businesses that don't need it.
Madam Chair, could you expound on that? I think one of the things that we've really struggled with, and this committee has struggled with, and that is our intent to do a better job of targeting precious resources to the businesses in greatest need. And early on, there was a lot of feedback that would indicate that really, that targeting just was not happening. We know we have to balance administrative complexity with, and so I'm a little confused because we're talking about ongoing, and yet, so, and then you talked about, well, it could impact their expansion plans, the lost revenue in the past. So, do you envision that there would be businesses that, in fact, we would be providing financial assistance to support expansion?
No.
And I just wanted to be clear on what.
Yeah.
But I was not in.
No, it's more the missed opportunity to expand had the pandemic not happened.
I see.
Right? So it's 2.5 years of building that equity, building that cash that is in excess, that, that margin, that profit margin, which is very thin, that would go towards the future. That's gone.
I just wanted to be clear on it, and I realize Senator Sorokin doesn't seem to be on the screen. Representative Marcotte is. There's Senator Sorokin. Oh, I'm glad you're here. To try to use this opportunity in the most targeted, strategic way. And I know you've been having conversations, and this is not an action item. This is information, and work is currently, or discussion is underway around this serious ongoing impact that you talked about. So, but I just wanted to ask about the expansion, what that really meant. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's the missed opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
The opportunity cost of the pandemic, which is not captured here in these programs.
Representative Kornheiser?
In the last few months, I've talked to a number of manufacturing businesses that did perfectly fine through the shutdown phase of the pandemic. In fact, sometimes better than they would have before because people were sort of home and buying things. And now are experiencing major crisis because of supply chain challenges and are looking for ways to really seriously pivot their longstanding and successful business model because of supply chain challenges, which they, at least the folks I've spoken to, don't seem to think are going to change anytime soon. They see it sort of part of a new climate future or something like that. Is there any space, do you see any space in this program for a business that might fall into that category? It's mostly food manufacturing businesses, I think.
Manufacturers are not excluded. The way that the guidelines are written now is that we would open it up to just the priority sectors and then see how, after a certain period of time, say 2 months, see how much money's left to open it up to other sectors. As long as they can meet the strict sort of math that's written in the law, they would qualify. It couldn't be used to fund capital expenditures, back to the capital expansion question. It really needs to be operating costs. So it can fund those operating costs that might be new and different and more expensive. That's going to be the driver here as well for many of them. But they got to meet the 22.5%, and then they'll get an amount based on how the law stipulates right now.
Thank you.
Megan?
Thank you. You mentioned the hospitality sector up front when you talked about everybody going back into their favorite restaurant. I just wanted to make a point regarding 4 restaurants in the Rutland area that is factual, because they're all restaurants that my wife and I would go to or used or once upon a time could go to. Can't anymore. One's closed permanently. They went out of business. Very good restaurant downtown Rutland called Little Bears. A second one is, I'm not going to say the name, 50% time because of inability to hire help. A third went to Thursday night, a great pizza house that in the city that is always packed. 2/3 of it closed because they had one person for front of house, and she did both the tables and the bar. She was amazing. And then the fourth, I just talked to the owner in the middle of the week, and he said he used to do 2.5 turns on his tables every evening, and now he's only doing 1. And he said, I cannot get any help. There is no help available. I've pulled $100,000 out of my own retirement account, put it into the business, and he said, I'm exhausted. So just to, I just didn't want everyone to walk away thinking that, restaurateurs are doing great. At least in my community, those are all downtown Rutland, or one just on the outskirts of downtown Rutland. They are not.
Yeah. That's example. The other one I would say I heard yesterday, many of us like to eat fresh salmon, and the price of salmon in 1 week went from $9 a pound to $17 a pound. You can't pass all of that on to the consumer. They stop going out to dinner. So the point being, these are thin margins. They're being managed the best that they can. But if you can't be at full capacity, you cannot make that living that you need to survive. So even though it looks like it's all wonderful, it's really not.
Rep. Ansel?
So we heard presentations this morning in the emergency board and in here about the impact of supply chain problems, impact of inflation, and difficulties with workforce as being the sort of challenges. And I don't know, I'm reading through this, I don't know a whole lot about this program, but I guess I have 2 questions. I'm trying to figure out if this program is designed in such a way that it can help businesses with those issues, because that's really what they're struggling with. So it's sort of a general question. I don't know that I expect you to have a ready answer to it. I'm just raising it. But it takes me to my second question, which is really a process question. We don't have, we're not here to approve what you're doing. We're here to listen to it. But it seems as though it's still somewhat being worked through. And a question, I guess, maybe for the chair is what happens to the final decisions in terms of eligibility in connection with our role here, this committee, and sort of how do we those things work?
Yeah, thank you. And so let us perhaps turn to that process question. The way the statute was written, it asked that VITA work with JFO to develop a program, and that proposal be presented to the chairs of the House Commerce Committee and the Senate Committee on, their equivalent of commerce. Sorry, I can't remember the title. And then also shared with the joint, sorry, Senator Sorokin. You need economic development. Economic development. But isn't it housing?
Housing and general.
It's everything.
It's everything. Yeah.
And general affairs.
And general affairs, yeah.
Known as miscellaneous.
So it envisioned a presentation on how this would be implemented, how the program would go forward. So we have no approval authority. And let me just say that Vita, Ms. Polinas, has been working very hard with the different players in this, trying to get an understanding of what our legislative intent was, being clear on what the statute is. And I think there still are, all of the threads have not been drawn together so that there's general agreement on this. And what I would like to propose is that a couple more weeks be taken, 2 weeks be taken to continue the conversation, to try to narrow and bring together the parties working and asking the Joint Fiscal Office to take a pretty significant lead in continuing to kind of draw this together so that we can have some agreement on this. But as was pointed out, there is no approval authority. Your job was to come here and tell us what you're doing. But given that there isn't yet that agreement between the two chairs, and I'm not sure where we are with JFO, conversations still need to happen. And so that is, I believe, the thought that is there. Talked with Ms. Polinas about this yesterday evening, and I think that's generally acceptable to you.
Yes, I do not want it to drag on to, say, September. We've got to either move forward or decide that this is not going to move forward. It wouldn't move forward if it got to the point where the guidelines needed to be so strict that the money is not going to get out the door. And that's not what anybody wants to happen. So that's my concern there.
Yeah. So we're made statements in the statute about some of the limitations or the prescriptions around the program, and we just need to come to an agreement about what that means and how it would work going forward. And so I thank you for your willingness to work for a couple of more weeks, which I am thinking of as August 15th. I'm sure we will hear reports from JFO. There'll be conversations between you and the two chairs between JFO and the two chairs of the committees, and we can get a report on this from our partners. But I think that does the trick. Rep. Ansel.
Well, maybe it does, and maybe it's the best we can do. But we have not been presented with a program. And when there is a program, some consensus around a program, we won't be able to ask questions about it unless we meet again. I think the 2 weeks makes a lot of sense, but I'm not sure that simply emailing out a program or emailing out the fact that there's been an agreement complies with what the statute said.
Well,
that's really my process. How do we get, how are we able to ask questions about the program when it's not being, not your fault that it's not being presented.
This is the program, but there's disagreement, I guess, from parties on, is this the right program?
I don't have an answer. I'm just asking a question.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have an answer.
It's an unusual process for me too, so I'm glad to hear that it's unusual for you.
Yeah.
Someone state what the language is, because we're not required to.
It's here in front of us. It says that the authority should submit the proposed guidelines and processes to the Joint Fiscal Committee and the chairs of the relevant legislative committees of jurisdiction, which will aim prior to accepting applications for loans through the program. And so it's specific and definite. It needs to be presented to us. I guess it doesn't say that we need to be able to ask questions about it.
Right.
Typically do.
Well, so we're hearing, I guess, a presentation of what has been developed so far. I was imagining that by distributing this again, that would accomplish the intent. But I'm ready to be told I'm wrong. Senator Cummings?
I think as we've heard today, things are rapidly changing. And when we were in session and this was being written, the needs of business that we perceived then might be different now. And I think that may be leading to some of the difficulty. We were addressing businesses that were shut, not supply chain so much, and that seems to have risen up in the last few months. Supply chain and in labor. I mean, labor is just. I've known several local businesses that have cut back hours and done all kinds of things because they can't cover all their normal shifts. They may be reducing their overhead because they don't have to pay anybody, but their bottom line has got to be affected. Some of them are fairly seasonal.
So herein lies the dilemma. Statute was written. We all agreed to a program back in May that said, do this. Life continues to change, but we don't have the authority to say, no, don't do that. The legislature has approved what Vida is trying to accomplish here with us. So I don't know how to address the factors going forward. I think we have to try to address what was the statute asking us to do. And, we may have to revisit this other problem. This to me is a backward-looking program, not a forward-looking program. And it was written that way, and I don't think we can change it. And so what we're trying to do is to make sure that, as written, it's being implemented according to the intention of the directives. Rep. Kornheiser?
I guess I would offer that if the need isn't there that we foresaw when we passed this, that might be okay. And we can then in January figure out a different way to spend the money.
Does that mean not approving any applications now?
I mean, or approving an application and you just, and the money, we might say this is fine and fits the statutory need, but then maybe only 1 or 2 applications are approved because the need isn't there. And in January, we say, oh, actually, we need to focus on supply chain issues or labor issues, and that becomes what we work on. And I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world.
So to be clear, we are not asked in statute to approve anything. We do not have an approval opportunity. We were just asked to be consulted with, which is happening.
Yeah. But my larger point about it would not be the worst thing in the world if the money doesn't go out. Yes.
Yeah.
I would say in a community that has a recreational community where I come from, we have virtually no restaurants or businesses. Only one that is back to full-time open. Everybody's running part-time, half-time, and you can't get anything to eat in my community on Monday and Tuesday, period. So those businesses are not picking up, they're not doing all that well. To wait to January for them, I think is.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I am just struggling with moving this forward. I'm thinking we're almost engaging in a revisionist of the statute and the purpose, which I don't think we can't do. They have proposed, they have met the requirements of the language to submit it. But what's been submitted is still in the top, is in the process of possibly being clarified a bit, particularly with the involvement of the two chairs of the committees of jurisdiction, as well as the joint fiscal office. I have to give great deference to the chairs of those committees in terms of what was the discussion, the intent, and if over the next couple of weeks, the very issues that have come up can, in the process of those conversations, can be resolved. I feel we need to move forward. I feel that the chairs are in the best position to talk about the intent, and you get into the nuances here. I can't begin to understand them all, and I just am reluctant to not provide assistance because people are talking about it. If the money doesn't all go out, I want it targeted. The intent, I think, it has been well stated time after time in terms of how we use the money. But I would feel, maybe I'm unique, but I would feel comfortable to say what's being proposed has needs a little bit more time, and that we ought to give the chairs and the joint fiscal staff, and then if people want to come back and share that final product and people want to pour over it, but I would like to move it on and give the with the understanding and the hope that we can come to some kind of common agreement.
So Representative Ansel.
So I agree that the chairs of the relevant committees know a whole lot more about this, certainly than I do, and agree with giving them deference. What I think I feel cautious about is somehow describing this process in a way that sets up an expectation that we expect them to come to an agreement in 2 weeks or whatever it is. I think if there isn't a consensus about how to proceed, then I think people should continue to work at it. And if it turns out that that it gets delayed or that only a few applications get approved, I think that's not the end of the world. And that's so. I guess I want to be clear that I'm at least not saying you have 2 weeks to sort this out and we'll go with whatever is on the table at that point.
My concern is that this not be an ongoing discussion. It seems to me that it should, in a finite period of time, we should be able to reach an agreement. I'm not sure, and maybe 2 weeks isn't the right amount, but I am not sure that it needs to take 2 months to accomplish. And so I guess, yeah. I was trying to give it a time frame so that there was some certainty that, that tends to focus us and push us to making decisions. The way this was written, it didn't say, and you must have agreement among all parties. It simply said, and the statute said, submit to the two chairs and this committee. And honestly, that's already been accomplished, and they have submitted a proposal and to all of us. And I was just recognizing that there wasn't this agreement yet, asking if people would continue having the conversation. The other thing is that we can certainly choose to meet anytime we wish. And if we wish to have another meeting to hear what people are presenting, we can do that. We don't have to wait till the middle of September. My view is putting this off until the next scheduled JFC meeting is not going to necessarily accomplish anything other than letting 2 months go by.
And wouldn't that only be informational anyway? Because it's not an action item for the authority for this committee. That's what I'm struck with. It's written.
Others want to join us in this conversation? No.
The two chairs?
Yeah.
Oh, no, they can't talk. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's like Mike has his hand up.
Well, yeah, okay, so Rep. Marcotte?
Thank you, Representative Hooper. I think we're all on the same page as what we want to accomplish. We're just not quite there yet on how to do that. But I do want us to keep in the back of our mind that a lot of the money that is in this program was the money that was in the bridge grants that went nowhere. And we need to be extremely careful on how difficult we make this program in order to be sure that money gets out the door and doesn't just sit there and languish and not be put to use. So I think we need to try to work the differences out if we can. And I think the money is needed. But you know, we've got to be careful that we're not so stringent that and so worried that one business is going to get one more dollar than they should have gotten. So I'm hopeful that we can get this worked out.
Senator Sorokin?
So I want to echo what Chairman Marcotte just said. I think I'm in agreement with the chair's approach, and that's after talking to Vita. I think we all are on the same page, and the language in the statute is clear that we have to look at ongoing, continuing needs. I think the problem lies in the guidelines that are presented. It doesn't really set forth any kind of factor of ongoing, continuing needs, and that needs to be inserted in the guidelines. And I feel confident that the 2-week period, with the help of JFO, we can have some factors in the guidelines that look at current needs of the business as well as past needs. So I think it's doable within the 2-week time frame.
Thank you. Okay, so I've made a proposal that we take an additional 2 weeks. I think that, I'm not going to repeat the discussion. Would someone like to propose a different approach? And if not, thank you. Why don't we, I think, I'm not going to try to repeat what we've just agreed to. I think we're clear on how we're trying to draw this together. And we really do appreciate, particularly Vita, who was tapped on the shoulder and said, will you take this over? And they kind of stepped into a difficult situation. So thank you for being willing to do that and to work with us. And I'm confident that we're going to get to a good place that's going to serve Vermonters, which is what we're trying to do at the end of the day. Y'all will keep working through JFO. They will report to us. If we've got questions, we always have the ability to call ourselves back together and have this conversation. So we've got a way to move forward. So thank you. Thank you for that very much, Ms. Lemus. And Senator Sorokin and Rep. Marcotte for joining us and helping move us along.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we are moving on to our 125 agenda item, which is a discussion of we're now into the grants, and Commissioner Goldstein, if you'll join us, and Ms. Polima, she could have stayed with us perhaps, I don't know if it's necessary, but this is an action item. The first one is the Small Business Credit Initiative, which we gave permission to ACCD to submit back in November. If people read their minutes closely, you will notice that's what we did in our last meeting, and now we need to consider accepting the grant and associated with it. No, that's a different. Is the position associated, the next is different.
That's not, yeah.
If you can use every other word, just to move us on.
Yeah, sure, it could be very quick, but good afternoon and committee members, and thanks for having us. The
The amount of money coming into the state is $57,947,977. This is the U.S. Treasury's program, State Small Business Credit Initiative, to be allocated to Vermont, and that's by formula. They are awarded to Vermont, and the state designated Vermont Economic Development Authority, VEDA, to be our implementing entity on behalf of the state of Vermont. So this is available through ARPA, but it is not state fiscal recovery funds. The idea would be in November, you gave us permission to set forth the application, and our intent was to take that 57.9, divide it into both loans as well as venture capital. So as a way to spur small business development into the state. So I believe, so that was November, and then we applied in February, and the Treasury just gave approval of that application. And I think the last thing that is waiting before we can embark on this is approval from Joint Fiscal Committee to receive those funds so that we could get the agreements in place with the venture capital folks and VEDA and everybody else that needs to work straight away to start implementing.
Thank you for that brief explanation. Yeah. Questions for the commissioner or Linus? I had one, which was that when we last discussed this, we talked about a requirement that there would be an effort to reach small businesses, socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, and the BIPOC community, both in rural and non-rural areas. And maybe that's implicit because that is what is done, but can you make that explicit?
Yes, sure. That is, we have a goal of, we have to reach a goal of a little over $3 million in socially and economically disadvantaged individual owners. And also, if we don't meet that goal, we don't get the incentive. There's an additional incentive payment that we would get in addition to the $57 million because we met that goal. And we need to meet that goal within the period of the first tranche of money. They're doing this in 3 tranches. So we're confident that we could do that because within that socially and economically disadvantaged definition is rural area. And there's also a very small business requirement, which is under 10.
Yeah.
Which is the majority of the things that we did last time.
I think I testified last time that for the first round of SSBCI that back in 2010 so it went longer than that, but the average size business was under 10 people. So that's what
so we hit that.
Yeah, we hit that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Representative Briglin.
Thanks, Representative Hooper. A quick question about the recycling provisions of the program. I see that the grant from Treasury, I see a 2028 expiration of the program, but presumably at that point, there'll still be loans outstanding and equity investments out. Is this forever money? When this $58 million comes back to VEDA and partners who are working on this program, is it then recyclable forever? Is this evergreen funds?
Yes, it is. That is correct. The reason for the 2028 is I think that is the last possible date that you can get the 3rd tranche, but it really is a 10-year program. So yeah, as money comes back, VEDA can continue to use that for loans and venture.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Rep. Kornheiser?
I'm curious if either of your agencies have existing programs that this will be supplanting, anything like that?
This money will go straight towards our direct lending that we do in participation with banks already. So it's another source of capital for us to use, which is essentially zero cost capital. So last go around, there was a lot of narrative around a big interest subsidy, but really it's—
Can you speak up a little bit? I'm sorry, the air is really loud behind me.
Well, I think the easier answer is it goes right into our existing programs.
Yes.
For the loan piece,
For the loan
but the
piece,
venture
yeah.
capital, we don't have anything of this order of magnitude. There is VSET that has small, much smaller variation. I think in the last session it was 900,000. So this is definitely.
What was the end of your sentence? I'm sorry.
Sorry?
What was the end of your sentence? I'm
Sorry, VSET, like as an example, just to give you a frame of reference, the last session, I believe they got a $900,000 appropriation for the seed capital fund. So just the magnitude of this is so much greater.
I'd like to move approval of the grant. I mean, obviously, we sanctioned it by our action in November. We were successful. So I would think it would be for our congratulations that we got it. And I'm glad that it does have that benefit of being able to come back and get reinvested. So I would move approval of the grant of $557,947,977 to Vermont from the U.S. Treasury Small Business Credit Initiative. And the Agency of Commerce and Community Development is the participating jurisdiction, and Vermont Economic Development Authority will be the implementing entity.
Second.
I was gonna second it, but that's okay if Representative Fagan doesn't. I've never seconded that amount of money. That's. I want to say I spent $58 million.
I'm sorry, I sat here and I pre-wrote out.
You got it.
10 of these sheets so that we're.
No, you got to get back on the golf course, get healthy.
That's his last chance to do.
Yeah, I know. I may have another chance to get €8 million.
Yeah, maybe.
Any further discussion? If not, Rep. Fagan, call the roll, please.
Thank you.
And just actually, let me, on action items, it's only members who are present, who are in the room, not on the screen, who are allowed to vote.
Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Bruce.
Yes.
Rep. Briglin is not here. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
10-0-1.
Okay, thank you. And just technically, Rep. Briglin is with us.
Yes.
He's just not allowed to vote. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a limited service position for the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for a new program relating to HUD. Alex is on the.
Alex Farrell.
Hi, thank you for joining us. And it looks like you are, or if you could very briefly describe this to us, that would be terrific.
Yes, I can. So thank you, Chair and committee members. So this environmental specialist position is to support Vermont Community Development Program's environmental officer. The environmental officer ensures environmental compliance for our annual allocation from HUD, which is about $8 million per year. This position would be to support the new allocations. And so on the sheet, it may say the recovery housing program was 2 allocations for 1.5 million. Since we submitted this, it's been updated to 3 allocations, and it's now 2.2 million. In addition, the home ARP allocation from HUD of 9.5 million. So this would just be to add capacity to deal with those funds.
Are there any questions for Mr. Farrell? If not, could we have a motion?
Whatever it is.
Hand that to him.
Approval of the position.
Perhaps we can let Senator Kitchell read the rest of that move.
Yeah, she's got it?
Yep.
Yeah.
To approve 1 limited service position in the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Department of Housing and Community Development, under a grant from USDA Housing and Urban Development. So we're
Senator
approving the
Sears
position.
moved, and seconds, please.
I'll second it.
Senator Bruce, seconds it.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, if you'll call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Bruce.
Yes.
Rep. Briglin, obviously zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
10-0-1.
Great, thank you. next 3 grants, I don't recall that we've handled them this way. This is from my municipal days. My suggestion is that we gather all 3 of these together. They were sent out to us in advance. You've had them, some of them for almost 30 days to do your review. And I would also note that they're significantly smaller requests, and just for the sake of time, I thought, unless there are questions, and I believe that we've had folks who are available to speak to us about any of them, but if they're not questions, perhaps a motion could be made to approve all 3 at once.
Just wondered, Sunshine Lady humanitarian grants.
I actually looked it up, but I can't remember what it was.
No,
It wasn't a Chinese front.
Thank you. Yeah. Ms. Trishman.
My name is Laura Trishman. I'm the State Historic Preservation Officer. The Sunshine Lady is Doris Buffett's nonprofit organization that she set up.
Doris.
Sister.
That's why I
know who this is.
Oh, Warren Buffett.
Oh, Warren. Oh, that's
this is Doris Buffett. Warren and Doris. All right, thank you. I think we should approve it on that.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a legitimate organization.
Obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Shall I read the rest of it?
Would you?
Certainly. So Senator Cummings moves to accept grants 3099, 3100, 3101 as detailed below. JFO grant 3099 in the amount of $105,228 to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Environmental Conservation from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. JFO grant 3100, $25,000. Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development, Vermont Division of Historic Preservation from Sunshine Lady Humanitarian Grants Program, and JFO Grant 3101, $250,000 to the Vermont Agency of Human Services, Department of Mental Health from Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Great.
I'll second. Doesn't
I'm the only one who looked at the Sunshine.
Go ahead.
But was that useful to anyone?
Senator Cummings moved and Representative Ansel seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Brew. Yes. Rep. Brigman zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Sears. Yes. Senator Westman.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
10-01.
Okay, terrific. And now the next item on the agenda is with the Agency of Natural Resources, and Deputy Secretary Gendron is here to present on this request for 31 limited service positions. We have these items. Pardon?
Can you?
Yeah, why that 31, combine the two in your discussion if you would, and I believe we have those documents in our packet. They did a nice slide deck as summary of it that accompanied the more detailed information. So did you have
I have a question before we go into all these limited service positions.
Yeah.
That's okay. If someone could remind me about what the sort of labor protections laws are around limited service positions with the state. I don't remember, and I think we're about to add like a lot of them.
They are, in terms of cost and benefits, they are the same as permanent positions. They, in terms of the retirement and so forth, they're unlike temps, which carry no benefits. So the only thing is they generally, because they're with a grant, which is time limited, that's why they're called limited service, although sometimes they get extended. But in terms of the benefits, they're equivalent to the permanent classified.
Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you.
The term of them is supposed to be for 3 years, as Senator Kitchell noted. They are occasionally or more than occasionally extended, and it is something that we should watch very carefully because they we certainly know of some limited service that have lived out there for way too long. And the intention is that they be time limited. We've actually had I had a conversation with A&R, which was the first of these, and I was like, no, these ought to be permanent positions. Why are you asking for limited service? And they talked me personally into the nature of them, in fact, does lend itself to limited service, even though they are for 5 years. You're going to have to ask, if we approve, they'll have to ask for some additional time when it's appropriate. But good setup, because you're right, we're talking about a lot of positions. Yeah, so Deputy Secretary Jen.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Maggie Jenner, and I'm the Deputy Secretary for the Agency of Natural Resources. And I have with me two folks who are really important to the work that we're doing at the agency around this particular request, which is for limited service positions for 2 buckets of funding. One is for the ARPA funding, and the other is for what we call as the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act funding, or also the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. They call it IIJ or bill. They're the same thing, just people use different acronyms. But so these are 2 separate asks. And so we have Neil Common with me today, who is our project manager guru when it comes to these projects, and then also Joanna Frito, who is our financial guru with me today. And I don't pretend to know the answers to all the questions, so I brought these 2 folks with me so they can answer questions as they come up. I'm not going to read the slides to you verbatim. I thought I'd give you the takeaways from them. One thing I did want to mention is I understand this is a substantial ask, and the magnitude of what we're looking at is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us, and that reflects here in this ask. And so with that said, I did also want to provide just a piece of information that we don't talk about very frequently, but is really an important part of what we've developed as a governance structure internally at ANR. And we've created essentially an ARPA and an IIJ steering committee where we have project staff that are both program managers within each department, business offices, policy and planning, and then myself and Julie. And we meet weekly, actually, just so that we can identify opportunities, challenges, anything that might be going on with funding, so that we can try to respond as quickly as possible, understanding that there are workforce challenges that we don't have control over. We have construction seasons that we have to also work within. So all of these things, we pretty quickly recognized that we needed to come together as an agency frequently and regularly. And we also work with Doug Farnham at the Agency of Administration through Treasury. So that's important because I feel like we do have a lot of funding coming at the Agency of Natural Resources, and we do have a lot of responsibility. So we take that seriously. The 2 big takeaways from the slide that says transformational opportunity for Vermont is that when it comes to the American Rescue Plan Act, which is ARPA, is the amount appropriated to the agency exceeded the governor's request, and it was at 30 million. And so that was pretty significant for us. And I felt like the General Assembly really responded to the request in terms of the financial bucket. And once we were able to really analyze what the workload was going to look like, that's why we're coming at you with a limited service position request around ARPA. The other takeaway with the Investment Infrastructure and Jobs Act, or otherwise bipartisan infrastructure law, is that this I thought was a really important bullet point. When we say it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, it truly is. It is this particular bucket of federal funding is going to provide $73 million more to Vermont in federal funding for water infrastructure than the sum of all federal funds directed to Vermont since 1957. So it's massive. The ability for our municipalities to take advantage of this, as well as individual homeowners, is really, it will really set Vermont up for the future. And I can say that the folks who work in our programs are very excited about this opportunity. I had started with infrastructure and ended with ARPA. I'm going to start with ARPA and end with infrastructure. The ARPA limited service position request slide, we're asking for 11 positions. Of those 11 positions, 10 will support the Healthy Homes Initiative. This reflects the sheer magnitude of need. So This particular initiative is helping with failed septic and water for residential homeowners, and it's for low-income residential homeowners. When we put out the application, we did not anticipate that we were going to get 1,200 applications back. And at the time, we had $1 million to address that. The legislature came back with us with 7 times the amount of funding, which we greatly appreciated. I really think this is going to have a direct benefit on Vermonters. We think we could serve up to 800 Vermonters in this. And the reason why we're asking for 10 additional limited service positions here is because it's 11 total. 1 will go to the 3-acre stormwater program to support landowners in that particular program. But these 10, this particular, especially as the program has started to talk to Vermonters regularly now that have failed septic and wells, this is much more like a human services program. We're really working with families who have household incomes of $60,000 or less. I was listening in on one of our program calls. It's even everything from folks not really understanding the kinds of tax documents we're asking from them. And so our program folks are really helping do direct service with Vermont families. And it's a lot of work. And so this is reflected in this ask here. So really it's like, what's changed and why are we asking for this? It's just the magnitude of need, the fact that we're able to get the funding from the General Assembly, the clientele, and that we're doing a lot of one-on-one work. And so, so that's really the takeaway from that one. Moving on to the IIJA limited service position request. I really wanted to highlight here, again, this is a request of 31 positions to support $400 million in investments. And there are 2 big takeaways I wanted to say here. One, the funding assigned here is going to existing CFDA through the Drinking Water, Clean Water Fund, Superfund, Dam Safety Fund, and Brownfields funds. And this last slide that goes through each of these are the existing funds that we're talking about. So when you see that projected funding matrix, that reflects there. And the other important piece to recognize here is that there is a state match, but of the $27 million in state match, we're going to be able to utilize $400 million in federal opportunity here. And so that, again, is a true opportunity for us, and we do need human beings to do the work on the ground. It's everything from working with RPCs and brownfields to working with municipalities to design, technical, our administration office. These are grants in, grants out. It's just it's a huge undertaking for the agency. And then, you know, you had
Representative, you can finish. I
was just going to reference quickly to lead into the limited service position request here is, you know, as the way that the loans are set up, as the loans decrease, the workload decreases, and therefore it decreases the need for the staff. And so and we also wanted to go through this process because just given the magnitude of the ask, we wanted to be as transparent as possible. So.
I agree. This is really exciting. And I guess my question is, can you fill these positions?
So yes, I think we can. And the reason why is, and I have Joanna here with me, but when we had the positions that we were filling initially with ARPA, we did struggle like everybody else with filling some of our positions. Joanna and her team worked really hard on modifying the job descriptions so that we were able to meet where the need was. So we were talking about, I don't want to speak for you, but I'd love for you to.
So Joanna Polito for the record. So a couple of things that we ended up doing, strategies that we had to deploy, some of them were actually redescribing, like moving duties around and so that we could do more entry-level positions to have senior folks actually work on some of this critical work and having the newer folks who are less experienced do, you know, some of the more entry-level. The other strategy that we deployed with the help of Department of Human Resources was with multi-level recruitment. So we often have, you know, some major job series like environmental analysts, environmental scientists, and environmental engineers. Traditionally, we would always go out with like, we're looking for an environmental analyst 3, and it was kind of like very tight and descriptive. Now with DHR's help, we actually go out and do multi-level. So we may recruit for like 3 or 4 levels all at once and then kind of curtail the job based on what we get for a candidate pool and then make the modifications as necessary so that we can still get a good person in and then just work from there. So a couple of different strategies we've reverted to.
And the hardest place for us to hire right now is actually within our business offices. And then the other piece too is we have all positions filled except one that we're purposely
on the permitting side, right? And another one on the granting side that's going out just probably next week.
Yep.
Thank you. Rep. Senator Sears?
Yeah, I have a question about the money for clean water. Had recently a couple of things happen. One is the designation by the feds changed from 20 parts per trillion on contamination from PFOA, and I'm more familiar with that maybe than others because I live in that area. And we have a lot of homes in our area that are in the area of contamination, but didn't rise to the 20 points per trillion level, but we're in the 10s, 12s, whatever, will now be maybe contaminated. Will those folks be eligible? And given that I think it was about $40 million, the settlement with St. Gobain to extend water lines in Bennington, while the $78 million sounds like a lot of money, that was not, it was a lot of houses, but in the overall scheme of things, I'm concerned that.
So what you're referencing is the most recent EPA decision around the PFAS, which is various contaminants under that. So that is under IIJs, that is within emerging contaminants in terms, and that is 100% forgivable. But Neil, do you have any sense of whether or not PFAS the cleanup of that will be applicable to IIJA?
Yeah, thank you. So for the record, Neil Cameron, Director, Water Investment Division. The funding that's listed under the line of drinking water emerging contaminants is about $7.5 million a year for 5 years. No match, 100% forgivable dollars. It's available to any public water system that's eligible to access the drinking water SRF. So to answer your direct question, I'm not sure we can make those dollars available to individual homeowners, but it is a conversation that we're having inside.
My question, and maybe you can get back to me on it, because I've gotten a lot of questions from constituents. The agency is in the process of designating an area of Bennington and North Bennington as an area of contamination, which means you can't use a well. The federal government has changed the limits. Are these folks going to be eligible for any help to get hooked into town drinking water? They weren't part of the settlement with St. Gobain because they didn't reach the 20 parts per trillion, but they were wells were definitely contaminated, and they're within an area of contamination that you designated. So you couldn't drill a new well there.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's kind of a conundrum here.
Yeah. Let us get back to you on that because.
I think this may be beyond this. My neighbors and other constituents in Bennington are really concerned about what happens next.
Yep. And I hear you, and we'll get back to you on that. I do know that this conversation is evolving because as the EPA will be having their final regs hopefully this fall. So we're still in an interim draft comment period at the moment. And so I think this is an important question. We're very aware of the need, that there will be some financial need there. I don't know if I know exactly how much, what pot of money, et cetera.
But the other part of that is once you've designated that area as an area of contamination, those folks can't put in a well.
Yep.
So they're stuck. And if they can't get help to hook into a municipal system, they're really stuck.
Yeah, it's a very uncomfortable position that we're in at the moment.
So,
but I will get back to you on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on this? I
realize the numbers are very large, but the money and the work to be undertaken.
Hang on, I think we.
So it's going to make a motion.
I know, but I think we may have a question.
I just
as it went around, because we spent a little bit of time in Senate Natural Resources on it. The 1,200 applications for low-income people that have septic issues for themselves. And most of them in their deeds, it says traditional systems, what probably means, not very good. You know that in real estate. How much money is in here for those?
So, will you phrase that question again? How much
Money is, we said $1 million, but how much money can we expect? Hearing that you're not sure you can help the how much money is in here?
Are you talking about PFAS specifically?
No, we're talking about generally the 1,200 you mentioned.
So we're talking about the Healthy Homes Initiative.
Yes.
So of the money that's dedicated, Neil, you answered the question.
Yes, you appropriated in FY22 $1 million.
Yes.
And FY23, 15. We have $16 million to administer.
The governor asked for 5. You wanted 20.
We did the extra 10.
Yeah.
That was that.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
what I
I just wanted to be reminded of that because.
So those funds will go to what we, approximately 800 failed drinking wells and septic systems.
So that 16 will do about 800 homes.
Correct.
So we have left in that another 400 that have made application. And I'm not really sure that everybody that's out there that is in that position, because there's quite a few places like that. They're just trying to get my mind around what
we had a scope, a problem that we didn't recognize was as big as it was for the state of Vermont. We were at the agency recognized pretty quickly how many people in Vermont have been living with PCOS.
And I suspect the 1,200.
What's reality? Yep, they may be better. So I'd like to move the approval. I'll combine the two of the 31 limited service positions. Would come under the IIJA for existing programs. I don't need to read the whole motion again. And the 11 limited service positions to Natural Resources, DEC, funded by ARPA, and that would be for the failed, to support the failed system.
Senator Kitchell moved and Rep. Ansel seconded the acceptance of these two proposals. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. If you'll call the roll, please, Rep. Fagan.
Madam Chair, Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Rep. Friedland is zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yep.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator West.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
We are 10-0-1 on both.
Okay, thank you. We didn't talk about how we're paying for the match. It was discussed in the memo. We've got 23 covered. Going to be an interesting conversation for 24 in terms of how we're going to continue matching.
It'll be a
share of this.
conversation.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Senator Sears will make sure we move back.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Secretary Flynn, if you and your team would care to join us. So the next item is a request for 26 limited service positions for the Agency of Transportation. Thank you for being with us. Well, I had the pleasure of meeting with the secretary about this. All of my colleagues received a packet that was about this thick 2 days ago, of which your grant was one of them, just as a setup that they may not have the same information. If you can give us a high level and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I got that.
So thank you very much. For the record, Joe Flynn, Secretary of the Agency of Transportation. And with me today are Ann Gamble, Jana Morse, and Michelle Boomhauer, and they are the directors of the divisions that have positions before you today. We submitted a memo. I don't want to read it all verbatim. I think you have it. I'd like to perhaps point out some of the highlights and then afford as much time as possible for us to answer your questions. We are here asking for 26 limited service positions. We are anticipating being able to phase some of those into calendar 23. However, the majority are positions we would seek as soon as possible. As I said, they are across 3 divisions: finance and administration, highway division, and policy planning and intermodal development. And as A&R, we are here really because of 2JA, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's a little different at the Agency of Transportation. 2JA for us is tied to the reauthorization of the FAST Act through the Federal Highway Administration. So our funding comes across the 5-year runway, if you will. And then in that 5th year, we also have 3 more years to obligate the money. So we do have a bit more time on our hands, if you will, to put this incredible amount of money into work for Vermont. And what we're talking about is typically before 2JA, we received about $235 million a year from Federal Highway Administration. With 2JA through reauthorization, we will be receiving $572 million more during the 5-year tranche for a total of $1.7 billion for just transportation across the 5-year cycle. I would like to point out that not only is that a lot of money to put into projects, but it also increases the need to keep our eyes closely on financial risks, whether through audit, contracting, and everything else. Those are all, they're not secondary in importance, but they're secondary issues that we've got to keep our eyes on with all the increased projects and spending that we're going to be doing. Now, on top of this $1.7 billion that's already locked for Vermont are 20 brand new transportation-specific grant programs, independent of our federal highway mainstream money. Nationally, that's $100 billion. And Vermont can compete where it sees it might like to. We have not seen all of the congressional guidance for those competitive nationwide grants, but I bring it up because there may be things we want to go after more, which just add to the workload that we already foresee through the 2JA investment that we know is coming. We currently have 101 vacancies at the Agency of Transportation. 3 are, we hope, closing at this point, but I wanted to give the uglier number. And to the question asked earlier, how might we be hiring? I'd like to address that, even though it was asked of A&R, but it's a great question, and I expect it might have been asked of us. Of the 101 vacancies that we currently have, over half of those are in district maintenance and fleet, so the garages, plow trucks, and when I say over half, so it's made up of district maintenance and fleet in DMV. So when you look at the remaining vacancies, we have done everything we think is responsible to redirect, repurpose, reorientate the vacancies to the work we know are coming. But we cannot reclassify a snowplow driver as an engineering technician for a lot of reasons, but we are striving to fill those vacancies. We struggled last fall as well. I don't want to take a lot of our time on what the problems are, but aside from the known labor issues, most all of those positions in the districts require CDLs, which require a whole different level of personal availability when it comes to the driver's license. It's a federal document. It's not a state issued document, and the rules are much different when it comes to drug and alcohol use and other things. So, but again, I wanted to address the current open vacancies, and I do believe that we've been responsible to take a look at those vacancies against the lens of the increased money that's coming, but have still come up with this request before you today for 26 additional positions. I also would like to point out that these positions that we're asking you for are currently accounted for in our fiscal 23 budget that just went into effect in July. And you might ask, why is that the case? And back when we built the budget, we thought we might be taking the track of going through a request during the legislative session and have them in the bill. That shifted a bit, and it was decided to go this course, but we left the money in there because we didn't want that to be an obstacle when we got to this point before you today. So That is the high-level presentation. What I submitted last evening also lists the positions by title, everything from environmental biologist and specialist to project management to aviation to rail, historic preservation. There is one assistant attorney general position. As you know, those people are employees of the Attorney General's office. We have a cadre of 5 at AOT right now. But again, with the up-tempo in contracts that will be going out the door, things like right-of-way that has to be acquired for the increase in jobs that we're doing, it's a tremendous amount of work that has to have legal eyes review everything. And I don't want to read everything here off this because you have it. I would rather attempt to address any questions that you have, and my colleagues are here as well to do that. So.
Thank you, Secretary Flynn. Are there any questions for these grants?
I'm the one committee member who's also on transportation. And so I too did talk to Secretary Flynn, and I know that he's also talked to the policy committees as well for subject matter experts, pardon me. The work, I think is pretty self-explanatory. And so I would move approval of the request for the 26 limited service positions as requested by the agency.
I'll second that.
Moved by Senator Kitchell, seconded by Senator Westman. Are there any questions? It was noted these are paid for in the 23 budget, going to be an even more interesting problem for AOT given what we see the revenue forecasts are going to be for covering these costs in 24.
We might have to increase
fees. That's the thought. Interesting.
Which have not been increased. I mean, like your driver's license and user fees that have supported
okay, enough of our humor.
Yes. All right. We asked for comments.
Tax increase?
We can do that right here, maybe.
Yeah.
Unless you're in the
why not?
parks. They just got $1 million.
Fagan, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Bruce.
Yes.
Brinkman is zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
We are 10-0-1.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Helping us understand this and your team joining you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll see you tomorrow on the train.
On the train.
Yes, we will. Big day.
We're slowly gaining back time.
Oh, good.
Perhaps not quickly enough, but we are. So the next item on the agenda is a request for 4 limited service positions from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And we have Ms. Willard with us on the screen. Hi, thank you for joining us. Would you please, Ms. Willard, would you please give us a very high-level description of this proposal?
Of course, yes. So for the record, my name is Abby Willard. I'm the director of the Ag Development Division at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And sorry to not be there with you in person today. This is a vacation week for me, and I'm happy to join you by Zoom. So thanks for that opportunity. So this request is for 4 limited service positions to support the execution of the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is housed at the Agency of Agriculture, which comprises over $38 million in an award from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Agricultural Marketing Service to implement the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center, which is one of 4 national dairy innovation centers across the country. the original USDA funding for this center was approved through a previous JFO request, at which time we requested 2 limited service positions, all the while knowing that as additional rounds of funding for this non-competitive centers awards were made available to the Agency of Agriculture, we would come back with additional requests for the necessary positions to execute the scope of work as the center's funding continued to expand. So since that original joint fiscal request, we've received rounds 3 and 4 of this 5-year commitment of funding from USDA. So an additional $13 million, as well as a special $19 million federal ARPA funding award through USDA that was also awarded to the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center. So I wanted to, just for clarification purposes, the $19 million of funding towards the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center is not part of the Vermont allocation of ARPA resources, but instead federal ARPA funds that were allocated through USDA to Vermont.
Abby, is the 19 million part of the 38 or additive?
It is. So yes. So currently the 19 million plus the 17 million is, well, sorry, the 38 million includes the 19 million of ARPA funds. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
So we envision that these 4 positions will be joining the 2 limited service positions of the center and playing that critical role of assisting with the overall grant program management, engagement with USDA, other partners and funders, supporting the events and the dairy producer and processor investments, as well as providing that critical high-touch grantee and contractor stewardship. So if you're not familiar, I can give a really brief overview of the Northeast Dairy Business Innovation Center that's hosted at the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. As I said, it's one of 4 centers across the country. It was launched in February of 2020 with our first allocation from 2019. And it serves a 10-state region, which includes all of New England, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. The vision of the Dairy Business Innovation Center is to support all dairy businesses, so cow, goat, and sheep businesses, through projects that help promote the development, production, marketing, and distribution of dairy products. So projects target dairy farms and processors while also providing additional support through marketing and technical assistance and research to help those businesses make the critical investments to support an industry during a time with declining market price and increased costs, as well as the loss of dairy farms across the region.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Ford? I'm not seeing any. Or would someone care to make a motion?
So she can go back to her vacation.
Yeah, I am so sorry to interfere with your vacation week. Thank you for joining with us.
I would move JFO 3106.
Senator Westman moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Rep. Kornheiser seconds. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. Rep. Fagan, if you'll call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Bruce.
Yes.
Rep. Brigham zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
We're 10-0-1.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Willard.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Your vacation. Okay, next there are 2 grant requests from the Department of Military. One is for a limited service position related to Starbase, and the other is a energy management program. I don't know if so. Yeah.
I deferred to Dan Dickerson on this from our office.
Dan, Mr. Dickerson, do you have special knowledge? Oh, I bet you do, don't you? Perhaps.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Before we get going, I'm going to abstain from the Starbase vote and recommendation. I will certainly answer questions. I've been on the Starbase Board of Directors for 10 years, maybe longer. So,
so we're going to think of questions to ask you.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Dan Dickerson from Joint Fiscal. I will confess that I don't have a great deal of intimate knowledge, but I can give you sort of the very high level that these two positions are being requested to fill needs within the military department. They intend to fund them completely with federal funding through their cooperative agreement with the National Guard Bureau. And this cooperative agreement, based on information that they gave me, gives them pretty wide latitude to use portions of that funding to fill positions as needed to perform their responsibilities. And so they're leaning on this cooperative agreement to fund these two new positions, but the positions ultimately need to be approved by the Joint Fiscal Committee.
Thank you. So they're 100% federally funded. Nevertheless, we need to provide this. Senator Kitchell.
You've piqued our curiosity. What is Starbase for some of those? And maybe Dan can answer that.
So Fagan would be able to, I would make it much better than
Two sentences.
I can do that. I'd love to tell you.
Not a run-on sentence.
Not a run-on sentence. Okay. So Starbase is a program, and I always get this wrong. It's either for fourth graders or sixth graders. Don't denigrate me for never remembering which one. Where they come in and they learn STEM for 1 week in hands-on, a participative and a team environment at two sites around the state, although that's now been changed by the Department of Defense, allowing us to change it. One site is in Rutland at the Armory. The other site is on the air base, on the Burlington Airport proper. And they do, I'll give you 3 examples of fun things they do. They do a one project called Egbert, where there is a raw egg that they have to get. It's in a space shuttle, and they have to get it back from space. And if you're right-handed, you can only use your left hand. And if you're left-handed, you can only use your right hand, because there's been a technical problem. And they worked in teams of 2 or 3 to get it done, and it's great fun. If you read yearbooks from that era, the kids all say their favorite activity for the whole year: Egbert. Another one is they build rockets at the end of the year. They build model rockets and then they launch them at the end of the year. So there's they really learn. They learn about Bernoulli's principle. I am not going to go there.
Oh my God, that's physics.
I'll get it
Bad
wrong.
dreams.
So that's just some of the things. And now we've been able to actually go out to schools that cannot get to us because of lack of funds or it's just too far. Also, we are able to advance to the schools money so that they can drive to us on a school bus, because gas is expensive. So those are some of the things that we do.
And
thank you.
This position's been vacant since
2017.
Yeah. So this position will allow more.
More Egbert.
I was just thinking of Representative Maslin.
It will. It will allow us to do a little bit more, and it will allow certainly the teacher who has been doing essentially double duty to kind of think a little more towards what she has been doing. So needs to do.
Oh, I think I'm going to move to approve these 2 positions. How many? There are 2. Yeah, there are 2.
I will second. My daughter actually did this program from Flynn Elementary when she was there. And it's wonderful, and I helped her build the rocket. I will not recuse, but I am very much inside.
You had fun launching that rocket, didn't you?
Did you bring the egg home?
They got it down safely, yeah.
There's a parachute. The parachute comes up, it flows to the ground. Yeah, they'll come up.
Well, Teresa, are you capturing all this in the minutes?
That's an important part for the record, that Senator Baruch helped make the rocket.
Who would have thought? Mitchell, seconded by Senator Baruch. I don't see any further discussion. Rep. Fagan, call the roll.
Certainly. Are we doing both or just the one?
Both. I did both. I did both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Baruch.
Yes.
Rep. Brinkman is zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
I am going to abstain. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser. Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
We are 9-0-2.
Okay, great, folks. We're getting there.
We're minutes behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because someone asked Peter a question.
I'm sorry.
I kept it short.
You exceeded 2 sentences.
But it's a fun program.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a request for from the Agency of Human Services for a limited service position for DEVA.
Ashley is back on the screen for you.
Terrific.
Wait, did we do the military institute?
Yeah, we did both of them together. She put them together.
Sorry.
And so one limited service for DEVA and two over in Dale. Ms. Berliner, thank you very much for joining us again. Again, if you'll give us a very high-level overview of this, we would appreciate it.
Yes, for the record, Ashley Berliner, Director of Medicaid Policy. And we are asking for this position because the work resulting from the 1115 waiver, as well as the enhanced FMAP opportunity for home and community-based services, in addition to some very significant compliance issues that the agency has to work through related to home and community-based service conflict-free case management, is requiring a significant amount of time and staff resources to address the policy issues related to all of these different initiatives. Right now, we don't have any policy person dedicated to thinking through home and community-based services policy, which is over almost half of our entire Medicaid budget. It's a huge portion of the Medicaid program, and we really hope to have someone who can be dedicated in thinking through how to engage the departments and the providers and stakeholders full-time as we work through our HCBS spend plan funding and come into compliance with some of these very difficult issues related to conflict-free case management.
Terrific, thank you. Senator Kitchell.
Yes, obviously that conflict case management, we had some testimony. This sounds simple, but there's a tremendous complexity. I know that the DAs, the SSAs are concerned about the requirements. On the other hand, advocate communities, representatives are feeling that it's been too long. And I believe that we have a corrective action plan requirement. So is this is all tied up with this position request? Would that be?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, to support that requirement to bring us into compliance with the federal regs.
Absolutely. We have 3 years to come into compliance with our corrective action plan related to conflict-free case management, in addition to all of the home and community-based spend plan activities and waiver initiatives that are underway over the next couple of years. It's an enormous body of work.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Berliner?
I move approval.
Yes.
I move approval.
Of both.
No, we only
just
testified.
She's only testifying for one.
3109.
3109. Is there a second? Second. Rep. Kornheiser, second. Any further discussion? Rep. Fagan, if you would.
Chair, Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Brew. Yes. Rep. Biglin is zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Sears. Yes. Senator Westman. Yep. Rep. Hoover.
Yes.
We're 10-0.
Great, thank you. And then the next one are 2 positions over in Dale.
I don't see Jenna, so maybe Ashley is.
Do you know anything about it?
I don't know a thing, but thank you very much, committee.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Who just came through the door?
No, that's
so.
okay.
Were you expecting?
She was supposed to be through video conference.
Okay. Well, you know what? We are 3 minutes past.
Oh my gosh. Should I nudge her?
Why didn't you nudge her? But I was also going to suggest that we could go to the CFO's report, and then if she joins us, she joins us. Yeah. So, Ms. Benham.
Yes, thank you, Catherine Benham. I think you all have received my fiscal officer's report. I think some of it is information you
received earlier today through other presentations, I would like to touch on two particular topics. One is just general. We do a survey every year about the office, and we got responses. And I would just say it has been, I know it's been a challenging year for all of you all. It's a big year of transition for our office. And I am supremely proud to be part of this team. Our overall rating stayed the same. There were a few places where we got a little better, a few places where we got a little bit worse, but it's basically very good. It's a 4.7. Is that where I'm? 4.75. 4.75 out of 5. So that matches what we had in our last biennium. So I just want to give credit to all the hard work. People stepped up to the plate and did amazing work under trying times in new situations. And I just thought you all should know that I've been very proud to be part of this and here. The other news, which I'm less happy to deliver, but it's mixed for me, is that Graham Campbell is moving to New Zealand, which is wonderful for him, I think. It's very sad for us. He's been an incredible member of our team. He's learned so much about revenues. He's an important part of understanding the legislative process. And I just wanted to acknowledge what a found joy and benefit it has been to have him with us. And I wanted you all to know that is where we are with that.
So I have to say, it was a very hard decision for me to not run again, but it made it much easier knowing. He has been absolutely amazing. I mean, I have these, sometimes I'll shoot off an email, what about some complicated tax issue? And I just sort of throw it out there in the ether. And in 24 hours or less, sometimes I get a full memo with, it's organized, it's got all this data in it, it's answered questions I haven't even known I wanted to ask. And he's just been incredible. I wish you well, but I hope New Zealand isn't so wonderful that you don't ever want to return. It really is, it's a big loss for us.
It is.
Yeah. And Graham has also helped us with finding a replacement, and Emily Byrne, who they have met in different roles she's had, will be joining our office at the end of August, taking on the revenue team. And Graham is fortunate for us while you've sold your house, you've sold basically everything, I think, right? But he will continue to work for us remotely while he can, I think sometime, at least into September a bit. So there will be some overlap with Emily. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all your support during this session. It was an interesting year.
Graham, thank you for being part of our team. And the only thing that makes it acceptable that you're leaving is that Emily is going to be moving in. But,
and then we all have a place to go.
Yeah, I was thinking about.
Is that part of it?
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I sent Catherine a question, and I would like to just ask it to have her. I have gotten the answer, and it's a good one, but I would like to ask the question in public, and so that she can respond in public. The Homeland Security continues to send us grant funding. And many of I believe all the grants are extensions of prior grants that at some point in time in the past have been accepted. And we don't see those grant fundings come through this process. And I'm not saying we should, but what I am asking for is how do we operate transparently as a state? And I only bring this up because I have seen SAMHSA grants where there is an ongoing grant that's from 2002 that another one comes through here. So hence this question. So.
Sure, yeah, so you're right. When you have a new grant, it comes through this process, you all see it in the AA1, unless it's gone through the budget process. If you have accepted a grant and additional funds come through, they don't come through the AA1 process. They typically, an existing program just adds more money in, and you would see it through excess receipts or through a budget adjustment item is where you would see it. So it is available if people are interested in following it.
And then there's always the base federal budget increases are built into the next year. So that is how you would see increased funds for grants.
Thank you very much.
Say
whatever you were going to say.
Well, I'm turning back to the limited service positions over at Dale. But did you have something for?
I did have something for
Catherine. Yeah. So Catherine, if you'll.
You don't even have to sit down. I just wanted to say you have overseen a tremendous amount of transition in your first year. And I just wanted to say thank you. And you've done an incredible job.
I was done with a lot of reports. So the team really, when I said they stepped up, they really did. So it's been great. It's a great place to be.
Quite honestly, I have wondered what the Ways and Means Committee and the Finance Committee are doing to the JFO staff. And it's causing
We train them well.
Maybe we should do less, not as good a job, just stay.
So we do have this one remaining grant request, which is from Dale for 2 limited service positions. They may have forgotten that they sent this on because they first submitted this application under another commissioner in March of this year. And so committee.
Monica White.
Yeah. Have you had a sufficient amount of time to review what you received, and do you want to take this up?
I think we should.
I think we should.
When you look at the purpose, we know that our long-term care facilities have been really under siege. Yeah. And patients are the sickest and most vulnerable. And so anything, and I think we know COVID is not going to disappear immediately, and the risk is there. And so I think that in the absence of testimony, the need is self-evident. I would move approval of the 2 positions.
I'll second that.
Second.
Thank you. So moved by Senator Kitchell, seconded by Senator Westman. Is there any further discussion? Rep. Kornheiser?
I would just like to find out eventually if, and I'm happy to reach out myself, if this is just going to cover technical assistance around sort of healthcare protections, or if it's also going to be technical assistance on financials. I know a lot of our long-term care facilities have had quite strange financial situations.
I think this would be separate because you're absolutely right. One of the things we had in the budget was to look at the rebasing, which is 2019, and their use of traveling nurses, I think, went from 20 million to over 50. So they're in desperate financial shape.
Some of them have had massive vacancies and some of them haven't. And yeah, absolutely.
And the problem is patients have been backing up in hospitals because they can't accept patients because it can't meet this staffing requirements. So but I think that's separate from this. This seems to me more prevention and mitigation and those practices on the financial side, which is equally desperate.
Great, thank you. Not seeing any other discussion, so Rep. Fagan, roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rep. Ansel?
Yes.
Senator Baruth?
Yes.
Brigland is assuming. Senator Cummings?
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell?
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser?
Yes.
Senator Sears?
Yes.
Senator Westman?
Yes.
Rep. Hooper?
Yes.
We have 10-0-1.
A moment ago, we said something about the grant process. That's not relevant. I just wanted you all to know that JFO worked very hard to get this inch-thick stack of documents well in advance of this meeting. And they did their best. And I know that we all find it very frustrating to be expected to make such monumental decisions on such short notice. And I honestly also feel that a lot of the documentation is not very useful. Some of it's just sending us forms that have nothing to do with informing us about the grant itself. And I have spoken with members of the administration, register my complaints, but I think we just need to get this working better, get better documents that are useful to us rather than 10 pages of forms that mean nothing to us. And we need to dig into that in somebody's spare time. It should be improved.
After January, you'll have some.
Yeah, Janet's going to.
So this is what Mary and I think you should do.
And Jane and I always do what you want.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is an executive session regarding a proposed salary adjustment for the legislative director. Everybody knows that that was their cue to leave. Thank you guys all very much for your support and help in this long day. Appreciate it.
So first, we need a motion to go in
We need
executive
to have a
session.
motion to enter into executive session.
So move.
Senator
If you want someone to
Westman
stay, you
moved,
have
Rep.
to.
Kornheiser moved, and we request that Ms. Donovan remain with us as well as Ms. Benham, who left, so we'll get Catherine back.
This is what I'm going to do because Representative Brickland would like to remain on. I'm going to go off live. Okay.
You should do the vote before.
Oh, yeah, we should take the vote before
sorry.
we go on, you're right.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the motion has been, write that down, motion to go into executive session.
We don't need to.
Yes.
You want to do this one? Okay.
Well, we have to vote on it.
Okay.
We have
To move into executive
to go
session, we do.
into, Westman moved, Kornheiser seconded.
Okay.
No one disagreed.
Go ahead.
So if we'll call the roll.
Rep. Ansel.
Yes.
Senator Brew.
Yes.
Rep. Brickland is zooming. Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Rep. Fagan is yes. Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Rep. Kornheiser.
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Rep. Hooper.
Yes.
10-0-1.
Okay.
We
So
entered at 3:20.
we, yeah, good point, at 3:20.
Now you can go
Did
off.
that.
Save this.